Well, good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Tuesday, July 15, 2014 meeting of the Edina City Council and the Edina Housing and Redevelopment Authority. Roll call, please, Ms. Megan.
Member Bennett.
Here.
Member Brindle.
Here.
Member Sprague.
Here.
Member Swenson.
Here.
Mayor Hovland.
Here. We have in front of us a meeting agenda, and we have, I think, one modification on sequencing on the agenda. Member Swenson is going to address that. It's in Section 8 under reports and recommendations.
I'm going to recommend that we move D and E forward and start with those. And so we've changed the order slightly. So D and E would start, and then we go to A, B, C, F.
Is there a motion or a second on that? All right, got a motion and a second to adjust the meeting agenda as stated by Member Swenson. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed say nay. Carried. And next we have the consent agenda in front of us. Looks like there's 6 or 8 items there on the consent agenda this evening. Does anyone on the council wish to pull an item from the consent agenda for further discussion? Otherwise, I'll entertain a motion to adopt the consent agenda.
So moved. Second.
We had a motion and second to adopt the consent agenda. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say nay. Carried. And then on to the special recognitions and presentations portion of the agenda. We have a new general manager of Braemar Golf Course, and Manager Neal is going to provide the introduction.
Thank you, Your Honor. I'm proud to announce that we do have a general manager for our golf enterprise. His name is Joe Bood. Joe is here with us tonight, and he wants a chance to introduce himself and address the council. Mr. Bood.
Joe, good evening.
Good evening.
As he said, and welcome.
Thank you very much.
And folks are going to hear that you came from a long ways away to join us.
I came from New Jersey.
All right. So tell us a little bit about yourself and your background.
My name's Joe Bood. I'm the new general manager of Braemar Golf Course, and I am so excited to be here. I don't think I can possibly portray it to you tonight. It was a long trip out here from New Jersey, and I've been on the ground 7 days now, and I can see all the potential that is here, and it's super exciting to be on the ground floor of something that's going to be so good. I've been in the golf business all my life. My father was a life member of the PGA. I grew up shagging balls for him in a field. We had a family-owned driving range a little bit after that, and then I went on to a career with Kemper Sports. It's a management company, has 70 facilities all over the country. I had been with Kemper Sports for 16 years. I basically managed 6 different facilities for them during that time, most recently in New Jersey, where we had an undertaking. I worked on a project. It was a $20 million new clubhouse construction that I worked on there, as well as a $1.2 million Reese Jones renovation to the golf course. So I was there for 4.5 years, and I saw that project through, and now I'm here for my new endeavor, and like I said, I'm very excited about it.
Good. Thank you, Joe. Any questions for Joe? He's married to a woman from Minnesota. That's what partly got you here, I think.
Yes, my wife went to St. Thomas, and she has sisters in Maple Grove and Plymouth.
It's hard to escape the Minnesota vortex.
No, I think it's going to be very good.
Good.
Well, welcome.
Welcome.
We're glad you came.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Joe.
Thank you.
See you Friday morning. All right. Jordan Gilgenbach is going to do his one of his periodic Speak Up Edina presentations for us. Jordan?
Good evening, Mayor and City Council members. Like the Mayor said, my name is Jordan Gilgenbach, Communications Coordinator here at the City of Edina, and I am here tonight to present the findings from the June discussion of Speak Up Edina on conservation incentives. Again, Speak Up Edina is our civic engagement site for the City of Edina. We've been using it since June 2012, and throughout this year as part of the City Council's strategic priority of communications and civic engagement, we're doing a monthly discussion on the site of varying topics. This last month's being conservation incentives. During the discussion, we asked these 4 questions: whether or not financial incentives should be offered for taking conservation measures, what types of upgrades should be incented, what kind of a program should be if one was to be adopted, and how such a program could be funded. The discussion was open from May 30th to through July 3rd. 23 total comments were made on Speak Up Edina and on the neighborhood website next door. 594 total visits and 832 total visits to the site were made, just shy of 3,000 page views. 40% of the respondents came to the site more than once, and all of the people who responded to the discussion questions were Edina residents. This is just a little overview of the comments that were made during the discussion, anything from, instead of right off the bat starting incenting different types of conservation measures, maybe starting with education as a starting place. That we need maybe to do smaller conservation projects as a city to make greater visibility of such needs, and looking at maybe doing, expanding our sidewalk network. They say that there are a lot of short trips that are being made, a couple blocks here, a couple blocks there, start to add up and creating that pollution and using more and more of those non-renewable resources. City could partner with different organizations such as Excel Energy to offer maybe a coupon on CFLs, and maybe looking at more of the low-income incentives. They say some of the comments were saying that the more affluent or the higher income people have the means to be able to make those bigger improvements, such as solar panels, where the lower income people don't, and so those are the ones who may want to make the change but don't have the financial means to do so. And then keeping in mind non-monetary incentives, doing things like a plaque or giving them a title like they're part of the Edina Conservation Corps, which is an interesting idea. Possibly incenting electric vehicles and working with apartment owners or even businesses to install electric car charging stations. Those are becoming more and more prominent as you see electric vehicles becoming higher use. Also extending its spending to partner with other organizations, both nonprofit or for-profit, to make conservation easier for residents. And then maybe exploring a shared car or a rideshare program like Car2Go or Uber or something like that, where people don't have to, where they can share rides and reduce the number of trips that vehicles are making. And then doing other incentive types for rain barrels or rain gardens or compost bins is another idea that came up. In the July discussion, we're focusing public spending on public art, which will be open through the end of the month, asking whether or not we should spend public money to purchase permanent works of public art, where in the city we're lacking in public art, where more could be expanded, and how much, if any, that the city should be spending per year or per piece or anything like that. So with that, I will stand for any questions on the June discussion.
Good. Thanks, Jordan, for the report. Anybody have any questions for Jordan on the report this month?
No, but thank you for doing this. It brings in interesting information.
Thank you.
Have you had any follow-up on last month's topic of bees and chickens?
I have not. I have not heard anything new.
That was the topic of the Grange meeting last night that I attended at the Grange Hall right over there, if you'd like to know.
All right. Well, we'll hear more about that later, I'm sure.
Probably not.
All right. Thanks, Jordan. All right, that concludes the special recognitions and presentations portion of the agenda for the evening. We've got one public hearing on the agenda this evening, and that involves a preliminary rezoning request, lot area and width variances over on 49th Street, and Director Teague will introduce the topic.
It is on. Thank you, Mayor, members of the council. Before you is a preliminary rezoning request with variances. The property is located in the 50th and France area. It's just north of the north parking garage. 49th and a half Street comes through here, France Avenue and 49th Street. The property exists today with a single-family home, picture on the screen. Another view, you see there's a 4-story apartment building located to the east. The applicant is proposing to tear down that single-family home and build a new duplex. You may recall a few months back, over the winter months, the applicant came through with a sketch plan proposal. Project looks generally the same. The site located here with the star, this block has a mixture of zoning from R1 to R2. The properties in white, those are single-family homes with an R1 zoning. Those with the hatch mark X'd out area, those are duplexes zoned R2. So the applicant would like to build a duplex on that site, so it requires a rezoning. So this is a two-step process. This is a preliminary review, and if the council is of the mind to approve this project, they would come back for final rezoning as part of a second stage. This is a look at the sketch plan that was brought forward over the winter. You may recall at that time there were 2 driveways proposed into the site. The applicant has eliminated at the direction of the council one of those drives and made some other changes to the plan. They've shifted that driveway. You recall last time it was located right on the lot line. They have shifted that away because there's a retaining wall in there. So for safety reasons, they've shifted that away from the lot line and it now meets our setback. So this graphic indicates the required setbacks for the site. So there are some encroachments here on the east side where variances are requested. So the request requires a number of things. Preliminary rezoning from the R1 to R2 zoning district, a lot area variance from 15,000 square feet to just under 9,000 square feet. So in the R2 zoning district, 15,000 square feet is the minimum lot size. The site exists today slightly under 9,000 square feet, so variance is required. Most of the R2 lots along 49th Street don't meet these standards either, so they exist as non-conforming lots. Lot width variance is also requested from 90 feet to 65 feet, again an existing condition. A building coverage variance is requested from 25% to 32%. 4%, roughly 4% of that is made up of patio space. So the building itself still does exceed the building coverage requirement of 25%. And then also that side yard setback is also requested. So on the screen, this is what as part of the sketch plan that was presented. And then this is the rendering of the building as proposed this evening. So not a lot of significant changes to the building itself. One of the concerns raised by the Planning Commission is that the grading plan that's submitted wasn't done by a licensed civil engineer, as is our standard now, as of a few months ago. Being that this is a preliminary review, should this be approved this evening, they would, and the applicant has been working with a civil engineer, but that plan would be brought forward as part of the second phase of development. So the primary issues to consider here is the rezoning from R1 to R2 reasonable for the site, and are the proposed variances reasonable? Taking that first issue, is the rezoning from R1 to R2 reasonable? Both staff and the Planning Commission believe the rezoning is reasonable. It's consistent with the duplexes that exist on the street. I'll just quickly move through some of the structures on the block. There's quite a mixture from existing duplexes, one-level duplexes, the multifamily on the corner, larger duplexes such as this one, again the single-level duplex, 2 single-family homes. There's a single-family home right across the street, so there is a mixture of uses along the street. So staff and the Planning Commission don't have issue with the rezoning itself. So the second issue, are the variances reasonable for the site? And the Planning Commission made a motion to approve this. The motion failed on a 4-4 vote, 5 votes needed for approval. And staff is recommending denial. In going through some of the reasoning, staff believes that the combination of all the variances requested here are just too much for the site. Based on some of the concerns that were raised by the Planning Commission and the Council in regard to the size of the house itself, they have addressed some of the concerns in regard to the 2 driveways. They have eliminated the one, and they have reduced impervious surface but staff doesn't believe that they've gone quite far enough to address all the concerns that were raised. Also, traditionally, the city hasn't varied on that building coverage requirement. We don't see a lot of proposals to tear duplexes down and build a new duplex or a single-family home to a duplex. But in regard to our single-family homes, we have not varied on that building coverage requirement for new construction on a site. Staff believes that reasonable use of the property does exist today with a single-family home. The existing home has about 12% coverage, and with the proposed structures itself would be 28%, so quite a sizable increase. So in conclusion, staff is recommending denial of the rezoning and the variances as requested. Again, the Planning Commission was recommending approval of the rezoning contingent on approval of the variances. If the council is of the mind to approve the variances and the rezoning, we would recommend that you authorize staff to draft a resolution, prepare findings and conditions on that, and bring back to you at your next meeting. So with that, I can stand for any questions you might have.
All right, questions for Director Teague. Member Bennett.
Thank you.
Start it off.
Director Teague, were the council to follow staff's recommendation and rezone the property but not grant the variances, what would be the net effect of that?
In approving just the rezoning itself, the site would be rezoned to R2. The existing home would become non-conforming. If someone wanted to build a duplex on that house, they would be required to meet essentially all of the R2 standards. The setbacks, the building coverage, those
Sure.
types of things.
So in other words, if it remains zoned as it is today, either the single-family home that's there could continue or another single-family home that fits code could be built. If it were to be rezoned to R2, then a double dwelling could be built that fits within the code.
Correct.
Okay. And I didn't find anything in the current staff report that indicates the dimensions of the other lots on the block. I know there's a lot of reference to them. I did find something, however, in the packet when this came forward for sketch plan, and I can give this to you for under the camera. I know that there was some question and answer given about some of the properties actually being divided with zero lot lines. So we can't tell just from looking, for instance, at the individual lots on page A4 of the staff report, which lots have a double dwelling on them and which single. Looking at this, can you tell us which of the lots, if you recall, have a double dwelling on them, which have single, and which are divided with that zero lot line? So what are we looking at for lot dimensions on the block?
Let's see, this lot right here, I believe, has been divided with a zero line with a duplex on it.
And that's something over 13,000 square feet, if I recall?
Correct, and they received a variance to do that in terms of the lot itself, because it is less than 15,000 square feet, but the structure itself meets all of the R2 standards.
Okay.
And I believe this lot right here just recently received a variance to build a duplex on it.
Okay,
Again,
and that's also around 13,000, or between 13 and 14,000 square feet for lot
Yes.
dimensions or lot
Yeah.
area?
All
Okay.
of these lots, I can say with certainty, don't meet that 15,000 square foot.
But they're above, most of them are above 10 or 12.
Correct.
Okay, and our minimum lot size for a single unit dwelling is 9,000 square feet?
Yeah, that's the starting point, and then we get into the medians for areas where lots are over 9,000 square
Sure.
feet.
And the area, again, of this lot is 8,800?
Correct.
Okay. Great, thank you very much.
Other questions for Director Teague at this point in time? Member Sprague.
How often do we approve a rezoning but not approve a variance on a residential project?
I can't think of a time that we've done
In
that.
20 years, I don't think I can think of
Yeah, and staff's not recommending that you do that.
Okay.
That if you're not of the mind to approve the variances, that you would deny both the rezoning and the variances.
Thank you.
And that was the condition that the Planning Commission had on their recommendation for approval of the rezoning, was contingent on approval of the variances.
Other questions for Director Teague at this point in time? I had one that came up from one of the neighbors who actually lives in a duplex situation in a lot zoned R2, who was actually supporting this project, who said that the switch from R1 to R2 in terms of zoning made sense to him. Then he said, we understand the proposed plan would require a 2.5% variance for lot coverage if the council agrees with the rezoning to R2. And then his comment was, that also seems reasonable. Does he have that percentage right at 2.5%?
I'd have to run that calculation. It's 32% is what they're proposing here, and that takes into account patios.
It's actually a 25%.
25%
Yeah,
increase.
and that, we
just-
covered that at sketch plan review.
Building coverage from 25 to 32%.
From 25 to 32,
Seems like it's
correct.
more at variance than, more of a variance modification than what's indicated by the neighbor.
It is, it's 25%.
Put his decimal point in there in the wrong place. All right, thank you. Anybody else? Okay, good. Oh, here it is. I saw it. I thought I saw Mr. Mortensen here. Do you want to come up and why don't you take 15 minutes for your presentation? If you can do it in less than that, it would be good. All right.
So I'm Matthias Mortensen. I'm the architect and project representative.
Could you give us your business address too, Mr. Mortensen?
2429 Sheridan Avenue, Minneapolis.
Thank you.
Yeah. I wanted to talk about three things. One, the changes I've made and how they've made the project better and how they've addressed some of the concerns that were raised during sketch review. Then I wanted to talk about why I think it's acceptable for the city to approve this project. And finally, I wanted to talk about why I think the city should approve the project. So first of all, I just want to quickly run through some of the changes that were made. So one of the primary concerns raised during sketch review was the two driveways. And during Planning Commission, I misattributed a comment made to a commission member when, in fact, I think it was Councilperson Swenson. They noted that that created an island, and that's absolutely correct. When I heard that, it was like a light bulb going off, and I think eliminating one of the drives made this project much better. So I'm happy that this process is pushing the project in the right direction. The other thing, of course, that did was it reduced the impervious surface by 933 to 544 square feet. There was also a comment made, as with the last Planning Commission meeting, about how a retaining wall would be made safe, because that one drive does access below-grade parking. It does create a retaining wall condition, and so the image on the left is what I was proposing, where on both sides of the drive there was a retaining wall and there was that condition. On the right-hand side is the revised design. And on the left-hand side of that drive, the grade is now sloping down to meet or come close to the drive, so that there is no condition that requires some sort of safety measure. On the right-hand side, there is still that retaining wall, but what I am proposing is that there be a fence there that would satisfy code requirements, guardrail code requirements, and that what I'd like to see is greenery on both sides of that. So the fence would really be kind of the belt of a belt and suspenders approach, and the greenery would really be for aesthetic purposes, but would also serve as a barrier. Then there were concerns about the amount of lot that was being covered by the proposed design. And so this image is showing on the left-hand side what it was and what it is now. And so there has been a reduction in about 500 square feet when you take into account the walkways, the building footprint, and the drive. And that's partly due to the removal of one of the drives, partly due to redesign of the walkway, but also the building itself has gotten smaller. And that's what this next image is. So on the left-hand side again, what it was. On the right-hand side, what it is now. I just wanted to silhouette things and remove all the distracting detail to just show what the difference is perceptually from somebody on the street. So the reason it looks smaller now is because I've lowered the building, I've lowered the roof, I've condensed the width of it, and I've also shrunken it in depth. And then the fourth out of 5 concerns that were expressed was, does the building fit into the neighborhood? And I've puzzled about this one quite a bit because, as Carrie mentioned, the block is a little bit of a hodgepodge. So, and I just wanted to, and you know, we just walked through all these pictures, but so I don't need to dwell on any of them for too long. But the ultimate point is there's clearly no predominant style. There's no predominant architectural features. But I don't think that means that there isn't a character to the neighborhood. There is. And what the conclusion I came to was that a lot of the character was kind of dictated by the greenery. And there's both a treescape, as there is with most cities, most blocks in the city, but there's also lower, smaller shrubbery that is often occurring kind of at the base of the buildings. And so what this image is showing in part is how a landscaping plan would help make this design more consistent with what I perceive to be the defining aspect of the neighborhood. But I also wanted to point out a few other things that I think helped make this building better and more attractive from the street and more in line with just a general residential feel. Some of them are a little bit subtle, but I have articulated some of the rafter structure, which I think is kind of aligns with some of the 3 other single-family homes on the block, where there's an articulation of framing. I also redesigned the entry to make it to give it more detail and a lighter feel. I think at least some of the feedback I got from talking to people about this was that there was a sort of austerity with the original design, and I've tried to make this more friendly and more at home, more residential. Then a few other things that I believe make this fit the character of the neighborhood that are still that were in existence with the original design. One is that the street frontage is narrow, and it's narrower than almost all the other street frontages on the street, and that makes this seem smaller than smaller than the average structure on the street. And the other thing that does kind of the same thing is the orientation of the roof structure means that the roof line that is at the street is the lowest point of the roof. So what you see with that front facade is, I think, the strongest has the strongest impact on how you perceive the building, and that is the smallest face of this design. And then the fifth thing that was brought up during the original sketch review was there the possibility of moving the existing building? And I did look into that, but it's very challenging because it requires a lot and somebody willing to pay for it, or my owner finding a lot and paying for it, and it would take a lot of serendipity, I think, for that to happen, and I think it's unlikely. But I did look into it, and I didn't want that point to be neglected. The last thing I wanted to show was just how the building, the position of the building has changed. It has shifted to the east. That's what this image is showing. And the reason I shifted it to the east was because it was apparent that my neighbor to the east, where there's a surface level parking lot, wasn't going to be as sensitive about what was happening here, and that my neighbor to the west, which is a double dwelling unit, it was much more important to be sensitive in terms of shadows that might be cast upon their property and disruption that might be caused by construction. So, and then also the building did move back from the street, which I think also helps make it seem a little bit more diminutive. So then, now I'm moving on to the second point, which is why I think it's okay for the city to approve this project. We've seen this image before. This is just the zoning map. There are only 3 other single-family lots on the block. So this is one of 4. That makes it unusual. But this lot actually is unique from the others because it adjoins to the east an apartment building, and to the south, essentially the commercial district of 50th and France. So this is just an aerial view, because I think the aerial view also tells a little something about why my lot is so unique. And you can see in this blow-up that, as with the zoning adjacencies, this lot is different than any other lot on the street, in that there's that surface level parking lot that's directly adjacent to the property line, and behind me you can see in the corner the parking garage, the no longer in existence Edina Realty building, and the other commercial properties, the Walgreens there. So I'm adjacent to tall buildings and a lot of pavement on 2 sides, and then on the third side is that other double dwelling unit. So that makes this property one of a kind on the street. But I also did a little research into the sort of how common it is for a property like this to adjoin on 2 sides buildings of the kind of height that I'm dealing with. And I am adjacent on the east and the south to a height overlay district of 48 feet. So I looked at the height overlay. This is what you're seeing now is the city's height overlay district map, and as I'm sure you know, all the colored areas are the height overlay districts. So what I looked for were parcels that were adjacent on 2 sides to height overlay districts. And all these colored numbers are areas where I found that to be the case. And then on the right-hand side, you can see what all of those different properties are. So of the 15 seen here, some are churches, parks, golf courses, wetlands, and the rest are R1s with the exception of a strip of R2s that don't end up having a double adjacency. And of those R1s, only four border height overlay district of the magnitude that I have, the 48-foot high. And of those four, they're all on blocks that are predominantly R1, and they are themselves all single-family houses zoned R1. So my conclusion was that that this property is very unique in the city. It's one of a kind, and I think that makes that special condition does warrant, I guess, a special kind of attention. So, let's see. I lost the cursor. That'll work. Another thing I looked at was what the size of structures on the street was. And so I used city assessor information to map out the footprint of every structure on the street and calculated that footprint area. And the average footprint size of every building on 49th Street turns out to be 2,450. My proposed footprint size is 2,266. So I end up being quite a bit less than the average size of buildings on the street. And the other condition I looked at was what is the street frontage of every building, and that's what you see in that thick blue line that occurs along the street associated with each building. That's what that is delineating. It's the street frontage, and that's important to me because I think that what dictates whether or not you think a building is in line with a neighborhood and consistent with its character is the facade. And so what this is showing is that the average facade length is 60 feet, and my facade is 37.25 feet. So again, quite a bit less than the average. And, excuse me.
Mr. Martinson, you're at the 15-minute mark. Do you have a little bit more to... All right.
Yes, I'll move on. Wow, that went quick.
If you could.
Yep.
Please.
So the last thing I'll say is there have been two chief goals for this project all along. One is sustainability, and the other is that this project be a place where a resident could age in place. And that's really the one that I'm focusing on today, because that's why, that reason, the floor plan that is allowing the age in place aspect, the single floor living, is why I can't push this within the 25% allowable. And the reason that's so important is because as this Edina comprehensive plan is laid out, there is a big need for a new kind of housing stock in the city because demographics are changing, and my client is one of those people that falls into that demographic and is looking for a kind of residence that this design allows for. But I know that my client is just one of many. This is a duplex that will allow two such families or units to do what I know this to age in place, something that I know the city something that the city is going to need to address demographic changes. So I will stop. Sorry if I went a little bit over, and I'll just...
Let me see if somebody has, if anyone on the council has a question for you at this point in time. Anyone on the council? Question for Mr. Mortensen at this point in time?
Okay.
Well, you could ask him now if you want, if you had some questions for him, because then I'll open up the public hearing.
No.
Okay. All right, you want to wait? All right. All right, thanks, Mr. Mortensen. You can go ahead and sit down. Oh, sure, go ahead. Member Bennett, Mr. Mortensen, would you come back
No,
up?
it's not for Mr. Mortensen. It's
Oh.
for Director Milner, our city engineer Milner. And Mr. Milner, you tendered a memo dated June 25th, 2014 that was not in the Planning Commission packet, but was on their dais for their meeting, and it is a part of our packet. And item 7 under sanitary and water utilities reads, the subject site front yard drains to 49th Street and is part of sub-watershed MHN 71. Downstream public system stormwater capacity is limited. The downstream system also includes a runoff volume sensitive landlocked basin prone to flooding. Item 8 reads, the subject site rear and side yard also drains to subwatershed MHS 58. This drainage path is through city property to the south and then to 49th and a half Street West Public System. I see from the documents on the dais this evening that the applicant has added 3 rain gardens in a landscaping plan, and the written narrative says that will handle existing conditions for a 1-inch event. We heard a presentation at a previous meeting, June 17th, about the upsizing of both the 1% and 2% storms. So my question for you, has anything changed since you wrote this memo on June 25th, 2014?
It has not, other than we did receive comments from their civil engineer stating they'd meet those requirements and submit the design calcs if this project got approved. And they were stating that they would reduce the runoff rate and volume from the existing conditions in the memo they wrote to us a few days ago concerning addressing the memo that we wrote to them.
Okay, thank you. And one question for Attorney Knutson, and that is that the design shows 2 lower-level apartments that were discussed at the Planning Commission. They're designed, I guess, for caregivers, but they have separate entrances, I think, through the garage. Do not enter the units above. And what controls, how would the city control that use going forward so that with subsequent ownership, those units would not be used effectively as 4 housing units rather than 2?
You could condition the variances on that, just what you said. They'd be used as two housing units and not as 4, and that they have to build in accordance with a certain plan. You just make that a condition of the variances.
Okay. And enforcement would be voluntary?
No, I mean, if we find they're not in compliance, then they'd be cited for violation of our ordinance.
Right. Okay.
Conditions.
All right. Thank you.
Mr. Mortensen, I've got a couple questions here I noticed, I made notes on. Would you come back up, please? One was with respect to your, I'll call it your shadow graph, where you had the illustration of how you'd reduce ridge height. And could you tell us what the height is at the ridge line on the new or the revised?
On the revised
duplex? Yes.
The height of the proposed is now at, no, this might not mean anything to you, 930.6 feet, which is 33 foot and a half approximately.
Say that again, please.
33 foot.
30.5?
Yeah.
And do you know the height of the apartment building next door?
I don't. I know it's 4 stories. 4 stories of apartments with a below grade, moderately below grade parking. I've always assumed that it was basically peaking out its 48-foot high allowance, but I can't say for sure.
And then there was some concern at the Planning Commission that you hadn't used a civil engineer, and our Director of Engineering just indicated that you now do have a civil
Yes.
engineer.
Yes.
So do you want to comment on that too?
Yes, thank you for allowing me to do so. I have developed, in conjunction with my civil engineer, a preliminary grading and drainage plan, and I believe you all have copies of that. And what the plan is showing is how we could potentially accommodate 90% of all drainage and runoff on the site without putting any more than 10% into the city. And that 10% would really only occur in rain events of 1 inch or more. Everything else could potentially just filter into rain gardens on the site. I'm showing 3 of them. So that's a preliminary design, and the goal there is to make that accommodation for the drainage and runoff. There are other ways that we've talked about doing it, but what I wanted to put forward was a commitment that I can take care of. I can take care of a lot of the rain that will be happening and potentially shedding off of the site. And I think that's...
Yeah, the other question I had was when you did your lot coverage calculation, you were within 3% of what the code required, but you forgot to calculate in the hard surface area from the patios. You got a credit for that, but then when the calculations were made, the 448 square feet of patio added 32%. Now, there was some discussion earlier, I think, about you adding, at least at the Planning Commission level, you using pervious pavers.
Right.
Would you describe that?
Right. There are several exterior spaces, usable exterior spaces. That could be patios, they could be decks, or they could be permeable pavers, or they could just be lawn. There's been, I guess I'm unclear as to what constitutes coverage and permeability still at this point. So right now what you see on that redesigned site plan are decks in the rear, a hard surface down at also at the rear that is part of the basement exterior space, and then on either side again there's patio, and there's hardscape patio. Those 2 hardscape areas could be permeable pavers, but if we implement the rain garden approach, it is not as essential to our sustainability goal to also do permeable pavers, because both are accomplishing the same goal. So whether we do rain gardens or permeable pavers, it might be an either-or thing. It's really just how much of runoff can we accept onto our site, and we're trying to maximize that in one way or the other, either with permeable pavers, or with underground cistern, or with rain gardens. So,
all right. When you're talking about sustainability, I think when you were before on sketch plan review, when you were thinking about this project, you were going to use solar on the south portion of the 2 roof lines. Those face towards the commercial district over on 49.5 Street. Is that still in the plan?
That's still part of the design. The solar panels essentially cover the south-facing gable, and the other south-facing gable is a skylight. The panels that are on the southernmost south-facing gable have enough, would generate enough electricity, we think, to accommodate all the electrical needs. So they're definitely still a part of it, as is some of the other measures that I referred to, advanced framing, which will help reduce consumption of resources and increase the R value, the insulation of the entire enclosure.
All right, thank you. Member Brindle has a question she wants to ask you.
Just in thinking about some of the things we're talking about, there are some things we'll talk about after the public hearing, but with regard to what's on first floor and what is in the lower level. Something that Joni Bennett mentioned, is there no access from first floor to lower level?
There is access. There's access inside. There's access outside.
I thought I heard there was no access.
No,
okay.
There is
So-
access. There's a stair that goes down from the first floor to it's basically the area where the parking area, and then around to the rear.
There's also elevators.
Yeah,
well,
and then there's
the
elevators
the
too,
elevator is optional. I just wanted to
Yeah.
be sure that it goes all the way down
Absolutely.
into the
Yes,
lower level.
Yes, right.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Member Swenson.
Director T, could you run over for us what constitutes lot coverage? And so it's the building, which this is 2395. And then he has a driveway that's 544. And then the walkway, do you include that at 495? No.
We do not include the walkway or the driveway. It's just the patios and the building.
Okay.
All right, thank you, Mr. Mortensen, thank you. I'm going to open this, Member Sprague has a question.
Do you have some of that
Possibly.
lot coverage chart for the street? Is that something you have for the adjacent properties, or was that during our first go-around?
I didn't, unless that was a graphic that Mr. Mortensen had created.
I think
Okay, I thought we saw it at the first go-around. But you don't have that, okay.
I don't.
Then that's all you know.
Okay, thank you.
I tried to determine how much neighboring, how much other properties were covering with their hardscape, but it was impossible. So,
So your data on that rests solely on the structure itself, not any hardscape.
that's right.
And,
Yep.
and then your point was that you're still less than the average lot coverage.
Right, and if you did include impervious surface on lots on the street, you'd find that I was significantly lower because a lot of those properties, especially on the north side, have driveways accessing large paved parking areas in the rear. So, but again, it was hard to come up with actual calculations.
All right, thank you, Mr. Mortensen.
Yeah, but that's not covered. That was important.
All right, this is a public hearing. I'm going to open this matter now up for public testimony. Is there anyone in the audience that wishes to come forward and testify regarding this matter? If you do, you will have 3 minutes to give us your testimony. One of the side podiums works the best. Give us your name and address when you come up, and when you see that yellow light, you'll have about 30 seconds to go.
Nancy Thorvalson, 7221 Oaklawn Avenue. I have a question. In the surrounding area, are there any current non-conforming setbacks that perhaps were grandfathered in?
All right,
Or have any other variances have been granted there?
thank you. Anyone else? Yes, sir. Good evening.
Hi, my name's John Andreessen. I live at 4804 Maple Road. I've been a resident there for quite a while, and I've been up and down 49th Street quite often over the years. Maple intersects with 49th Street to the west by about a block and a half. I support Mr. Mortensen's proposal for a couple of reasons. One, I've seen what the upgrades have done to 49th Street since 2006 when the first tear down and rebuild was completed. And I think that this would enhance the value of the street. It would enhance the curb value, if you will. And the other thing that appeals to me and my wife particularly here is single floor living. Both my wife and I are in our mid-70s. We've been on Maple Road for 42 years, and we're getting to a point where maintaining a two-floor colonial is becoming difficult. So single floor living for us would have some great appeal. And my suspicion is that it would have appeal here in Edina as more and more residents reach ages like my wife and I. This kind of possible construction and living would, I think, be very positive. So I'm in favor of this.
All right. Thanks, Mr. Andreessen. Good evening.
Good evening. Ben Hackle, 7105 Gloucester Avenue. Just a question. I was curious if the footprint calculation you showed near the end of your slides included the 9,000 plus square foot commercial on the corner, or if that was purely the residential.
Do you want me to? No, we'll cover this. Anyone else? All right.
I'll move to close the public hearing.
Second.
All right, we've got a motion and a second to close the public hearing. Discussion. All those in favor of closing the public hearing, say aye. Aye. Opposed, say nay. Carried. We had a couple of questions that came up. One was Nancy Torkelson, I believe it was, Torkelson. And any current non-conforming variances that were granted on the street.
There have been a couple of variances granted on the street. They were for lot area and lot width to tear down the existing duplex and build a new one. But I'm not aware of any structure setback variances that have been granted. There may be some non-conforming setbacks out there with the existing older structures. I'm not certain of any, though.
And I don't remember any lot coverage variances.
And definitely no lot coverage variance.
All right. And the other issue was, I think, was it a residential facility next door? Was that what I caught from that last question from Mr. Heckel?
Oh, if that was included in figuring out lot coverage, the commercial apartment?
Did he calculate? Yeah, Mr. Martinson, you want to come up and answer that question? Did you? It looked to me like you did not use that one.
But on the side podium.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, so that it did take into account the average that I calculated. Did take into account it took into account all properties that had an address on the street, which includes that apartment building, which has its access to its below grade parking, its entry stairs. Everything is on 49th Street. So that does skew the average. But I also did a calculation of what the average footprint size of all R2 structures on the street, and that came out to 2,262, which is pretty much right where I am. So if you include the R1s and the PRD4, it skews it kind of in both directions. If you just include the R2s, I found that I'm pretty much in line with the average structure.
Thank you. Member Brindle, did you have some other questions that were staff related?
Sure. That are staff related?
Or other questions that you
well, I've got several items here. I'm still wondering about that lower level, Mr. Mortensen. The lower level, if you'd come up, please, and explain to me, because the lower level is part of each unit, and yet it is not accessible without going into the garage to get to that lower level piece.
Yep.
Is there any way to make it more contiguous? It just seems like that lower level piece ought to just be storage to me. I don't understand how it can be living.
So, right. So the primary reason for having that lower level space was to provide the possibility of in-home care for somebody who actually wants to take advantage of the age-in-place and single-floor living aspects of the design. The reason it's not contiguous is it's just a variety of factors, including the parking that's happening below grade there, the elevator, which essentially has to be at the perimeter of the building in order to allow for the parking. And it's those two things primarily that mean that the stair is coming down in the direction it is, which is really why it's not contiguous. But from our point of view, because the primary reason for that space is for in-home care that is not compromised by in contiguity.
Well, in-home care, but yet there are no windows down there. There's just the side window.
Yeah, but it's quite gracious, and it fronts the living and the living space, which includes a utility kitchen.
So if an individual needed in-home care, would they always be down there, or would they be upstairs? I mean, the elevator means to me that they could get upstairs.
Yes, that's correct.
And the in-home care could be delivered upstairs.
Yes. So is your point that
it just
in-home
seems
care could occur on the second floor?
Well, my main point is that it bothers me that part of the apartment or that part of the dwelling is separated from the rest of the dwelling. That's what bothers me about it. I can live with it as long as this is maintained as a two-dwelling
Which
building.
Absolutely it would be. And the commission included that condition as a motion.
I understand.
Which I was very accepting
I
of.
just don't see the in-home care requiring it to be in that lower level.
Right. Okay.
So,
understood.
As far as the impervious coverage, the driveway represents to me and the sun is painfully in my eyes. But the driveway represents to me a piece of impervious, the largest piece.
Right.
And the French drain, I understand how it works. I would encourage some pipes off of that to get the water out into either a cistern or out into the ground.
Yes.
But looking at the driveway, the other thing that I would encourage is to consider putting a strip down the middle that is not solid. So plant the strip down the middle or put rocks or some sort of landscaping element there, pavers or something, that is permeable.
Oh, sure.
Right. So that because the amount of water going down that driveway is going to be enormous.
Yeah.
And my other comments are just to wrap up my opinion of this. So I guess I'll go into that briefly. One is the variance doesn't bother me at all. I like the design. I like what you've done. I think that you, like other developers, have come in here and said that the questions on the part of the Planning Commission and the Council have both improved your drawings and your design, and I appreciate that. That's why we do this, and that's why we have a sketch plan process, so that we can go through a lot of feedback and give and take. The safety fence is good. Thank you for doing that. I think that the variance, I think we need to encourage development on a lot like this. It's on two sides of it adjacent to parking lots. And who among us would choose to plan our dream home where on a lot where this house was probably the first thing of those three elements here. And on one side they're encroached by an apartment building, and on the other side they're encroached by, who knows, a multi-story parking structure in the back. So I think we need to encourage development of this property. I like the fact that you've got a civil engineer on board, and then the tree buffers. You have some mature trees that are bordering the property on the east. Are those going to be able to stay?
The trees that are on the east are on the kind of in the southeast corner.
Mm-hmm.
I think those can stay, as can the trees on the south, because they're all doing something that we want, which is to provide a buffer from the parking lots that are adjacent to us. So I think they would stay, and they would be bolstered by additional plantings, trees, and higher bushes.
Okay. And just like to see a landscape plan at some point that shows how some privacy can be provided to the residents of this property, privacy from the cars coming and going and the headlights coming and going.
Yep,
okay.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Yep.
Just comments? Go ahead.
I agree with Commissioner Lee on the Planning Commission, who said this is an R1 site and a great plan for a different site. The site is dictating this design. And I think in terms of the square footage, yes, this design is in line with the square footage on the footprint of the other structures on the block, all of which are on larger lots. Commissioner Lee had a lot of comments about stormwater and in talking about the building needing to respond to the site, not just about pervious, impervious, but what is producing this coverage, and when you dig under and change the contours, that does something very different. Concerned about where the water will go. I understand that the applicant is now in conversation with a civil engineer, which he was not before he talked with the Planning Commission, but I know something about rain gardens, and the one between the back of the curb and the sidewalk may do something. Depending on where the roof drains off to, it will or won't do what rain gardens are really designed to do, which is capture the runoff from the roof. But it will have a filtering function before you get to the street from the hardscape that will reach it, for instance, the sidewalk. However, the two rain gardens located on the high point at the back of the property, I'm not sure what exactly they're going to accomplish, because the rainfall is chiefly going to come off of that height down to the lower level, and as Member Brindle points out, go down the driveway with fairly high rate, particularly in some of the storm events like the ones we've been seeing lately. And there was one additional point made by Engineer Milner in his memo, which was, again, under sanitary and water utilities, point 5, on the first page of his letter, which said that the underground parking ramp and large graded walkout egress well, in other words, connecting to those two lower level apartments, are very atypical for this land use. Both excavations lack positive surface drainage. In other words, they're lower than what drains onto them. This situation creates undue risk to sanitary infiltration and inflow, which is part of what we've been experiencing and as a community getting fined for by the Met Council. These areas should include either positive grade away from the foundation or be connected to a drainage system that drains away. So I'm hoping that that will be something that people who support this will look for, but that's not what we're seeing so far on this map. We're again seeing 3 rain gardens, one of which looks like it might be of some good, and 2 which look like they really aren't designed the way that rain garden designers would design them. So again, it's a great plan. It would look wonderful. It will look good. The question is the function and the impact on the surrounding properties, which is what we are experiencing, not the visual impact. It's a great design aesthetically. It's the question of the impact with stormwater. It's the question of the impact, additional volume into the public system, which Engineer Milner has pointed out is already overloaded. And I think that not every lot can hold every design, and that's what we have with this one.
Member Swenson?
I would be okay if this was R2 and it didn't need a lot coverage variance. I'm okay with where it sits on the east side. After spending 10 years on planning and then 10 years on council, I'm not okay with lot coverage variances for a lot of different reasons. One of them is the runoff that that Joni just mentioned. The other one is that, yes, it's only 37 feet across the front. However, it goes back more than that. And if you looked at, when you look down at all the houses and you saw the widths of houses, none of those houses go back. They have space in their backyards. Yes, I think this is an unusual lot. That's why I would give it the side yard variance, and I would let it be R2 if the right design came in. But I agree with Member Bennett that this is a beautiful design, but I don't think that it works here because it needs too many conditions.
Member Sprague.
I concur with Member Swenson. What we have here with the design is an intensifying of the land use from the rezone from R1 to R2, and then the pushing of the limits on the lot coverage. And not only the drainage, but the pattern of the homes, the relationship to the lot sizes on the block will start to change if you allow lot coverage variances. That will change the character of the neighborhood. So I don't believe that the circumstances have been shown to prove a hardship. There are some personal circumstances involved, but for me, that's not compelling enough to make a departure on the lot coverage standard here.
I thought that John Andreessen, excuse me, from the neighborhood made some excellent points about the improvement of the overall street over time. There's been some wonderful double dwellings built over there. The thing that I really worry about on this project is that there was no civil engineer engaged early on, and to take a leap of faith at this level that we can of the process, that we can handle this water on the site for the most part is worrisome to me. I worry not only about the site handling the water, but I worry about the building being able to accommodate the water with the way you've got it designed with the tuck under garage. I think that's a probable problem as well. So I could easily see why the Planning Commission had some difficulty here, why they tied 4-4, because Member Bennett was quoting Commissioner Lee, who also loved the sustainability aspects of the project and loved the architecture, and there's a lot to really admire here. 25% is a bit of an arbitrary number, I think. I'm not sure that anybody could really see the difference, as Commissioner Schroeder on the Planning Commission pointed out. I would find myself aligning with those folks that favored the granting of the variance, but for the water issue. I'm really worried about the water issue, and I just don't think we know enough about it to be able to advance the plan to the final approval level. So reluctantly, I would join at least some of my colleagues in turning this down at this point in time.
Carrie, how do you want that motion to be? I'll give you one.
You could make motion to adopt the resolution that denies the preliminary rezoning from R1 to R2 with the lot area, lot width, building coverage variances, and side yard setback variances. And if I could offer a couple of additional findings to deal with the zoning. The findings didn't cover the rezoning quite enough.
Okay.
So if I could suggest the current zoning is consistent with the comprehensive plan, and that the multiple variances requested demonstrate that the property is not suitable for R2 zoning. With those two additional findings, you could adopt the resolution.
If you do that, though, and someone were to bring in a plan for an R2 building that met all the requirements or only maybe needed a side yard setback or something, would that preclude that based on what we're passing today?
No, they could come back with the proposal.
Perfect.
Like that.
Then I will make a motion that you just stated with the two findings that you just stated.
Second.
Got a motion and a second. All those in favor of the motion as stated say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed say nay.
Nay.
Carried. All right. Mr. Mortensen, I don't know where he is now.
He's right there.
Right there.
Behind the
I
monitor.
hope you find the right use for this property. I mean, I'd love to see it improved. So, thank you for your effort. Okay. We're moving on to community comment portion of the agenda. Is there anyone in the audience who wishes to come forward and raise an issue with the council that's not on the agenda this evening? Seeing no one coming forward, we're going to move into the reports and recommendations portion of the agenda.
Wait a minute.
Oh, excuse me. Hey, good evening.
Hi.
Could you tell us what your name and address is?
Sophie Wright, 7309 Cornelia Drive. Sophie Wright, 7309 Cornelia Drive. Well, I want to say something about the apartments that are going to be done.
Oh, so Sophie, that's going to come up on the agenda in just a minute.
Oh, okay.
So if you just hold those thoughts of yours, we'll get to that. Thank you. All right.
But Sophie, what you have to understand is where we just had a public hearing where people were able to come up and talk specifically about that project, the 7200 project is just a sketch plan review. It's kind of a showing something on a board and we respond to it. So while you can hear and listen to what we have to say and what they have to say, this isn't the opportunity for a public hearing, so you won't have an opportunity to speak. And it's not because your voice isn't heard. We've gotten lots of emails and calls in the last few days, so a lot of voices have been heard, but I don't want you to feel bad that we're not going to ask you to talk later on, okay? Thank you.
So let's talk a little bit about that as we go into the reports and recommendations portion of the agenda. So a few years ago, we started this whole sketch plan process, and we've been feeling our way on that process. And the reason we did that was we wanted to allow developers to come in with ideas that they had for a particular neighborhood or whether it was commercial or residential, and they could get some feedback from us without having to spend tens of thousands of dollars and come right into a preliminary engineering or preliminary approval phase with engineering studies. A lot of money is expended on architectural fees and have their project rejected out of hand. So with the guidance of the Planning Commission, we started a sketch plan review that's intended to introduce a potential development project to the Planning Commission and the City Council to just get general feedback on the proposal prior to submittal of a formal application. Now, a developer may or may not decide to submit a formal application after they get the feedback that they request at both the Planning Commission and the City Council level. There's no official application made for a sketch plan. It's an informal review between the council and the applicant or the developer and also with the Planning Commission. The council does consider written feedback from residents, which, as Member Swenson said, we've gotten a great deal of, but it doesn't hold a public hearing on sketch plan review. There will be an abundant number of opportunities if this developer decides to file a formal application and move into the process like Mr. Mortensen did. There will be 4 opportunities for public testimony because we handle matters preliminarily like we did on the project that you all just listened to at both the Planning Commission and the City Council level, and then it goes back through the public hearing process for final development plan. So again, both at the Planning Commission and the City Council level, there's an opportunity to testify. So there's 4 opportunities there. The other thing that I think we wanted to make sure that we covered that I don't think we've done a very good job of it because I could see from all the emails and other council members have noticed it as well that we received some criticism, I guess I'll put it this way, for not providing notice of sketch plan review. Well, because it's not really a formal part of our process, no one's filed an application to have their matter proceed through our process. We don't provide notice in that same sort of fashion. Also, some folks noted that they didn't want us to do any voting or they were concerned about us voting on this. We don't vote on sketch plan review. What you'll see tonight is the proponent, the developer, making a presentation to us, and then there'll be a series of questions asked by the council. That'll be it. And then they'll go away today and decide what they want to do with their project. So other folks raised issues about infrastructure, very appropriate issues to raise, but again, preliminary to what's happening tonight, because all they're doing is coming with a rough idea of what they'd like to do. They haven't expended those monies yet to see if the sewer system will handle the capacity of their development. They may have some rough idea of that, but they haven't done a formal study yet. They haven't done a formal transportation study. We haven't done any of those studies. We haven't retained anybody to do any of those studies because it's just an interaction between the council and the applicant for the developer to get some guidance from the council on what we like or don't like or have concerns about relative to a project. So that's what's going to happen tonight. We're going to have the applicant, I think they're out in the other room, we're going to have them take about 20 minutes to present what they'd like to do at 72nd and France, and then the council members are going to ask questions, and that's it for tonight. Then they'll have to go back and decide if they want to proceed either with the plan that they show us or some variation of that plan. Typically what we see is some variation of the plan that they took to the Planning Commission and the City Council when they come back in and make a formal application for a development project. So, Member Swenson.
There's one other thing on sewer capacity and transportation that I noticed in a number of letters. Should this go forward, or any plan go forward on this property, everything that's currently being built or under permit will be taken into account for capacity for sewer and for transportation, for how busy the intersections are going to be and the numbers there. Transportation studies know how many people leave on an average and come back for whatever it is, whether it's retail, a restaurant, or a living facility. So there was a concern that there were a number of things being built, and to be honest, France is a mess anyway because we're reconstructing the intersections right now. So we all know how it feels to try to drive out there, and I'm sorry you live by there. It'll be done by the end of the summer. But I wanted everyone to understand that all the new construction coming online would be taken into account if this builder wants to go forward with something.
That's a very good point. Just as those projects were taken into consideration when we heard them. So that cumulative sort of effect with respect to transportation infrastructure, sewer capacity, all of those things are taken into account when we look at these developments after they make formal applications. So is the development team out there? Yeah, let's have, do you want to? Could you all hear what I was talking about out there? All right, so what we were talking a little bit about was the purpose of sketch plan review. And Mr. DeVolis, you're going to lead this conversation, I think, for the development team, like you did at the Planning Commission. Some of you may know Mr. DeVolis. He's a resident of Edina. He did the design work on that building at 70th and France where that vitamin shop is, and he's done some other buildings in our community as well, so we see him from time to time. And Mr. DeVolis is going to take about 20 minutes, and you can use your time how you think appropriate, whether it's you or other members of your team that want to comment on your ideas, and then we're going to switch over to the council, and the council members will ask questions or make comments regarding the proposed project.
Okay, thank you. That's on. Thank you very much. I'm Dean DeVolis, DJ Architecture, 3333 Wash Avenue North. And with me I have Lori Boyclair, project sponsor, who's over here, who's worked very hard putting this together. Adam Serafine is somewhere in the audience. And so what I'd like to do tonight is break our presentation into three parts. First part being Bruce Johnson, myself, to talk about the architecture and landscape architecture. Then the middle part will be about the affordable housing, what it is, who it serves, and Laura will give you an idea about really it serves people, serves a backbone of the community, teachers, legal assistants, things like that. And then the last part will be a preliminary traffic analysis by Matt Pacina of SRFs. So I'm going to take in those three pieces, if that's acceptable to the council, but you can interrupt me with questions anywhere along the process. So I'll give you a quick tour through the project, which, by the way, the development team has purchased. So now they're the owner of a fine 3-story dated office building on France Avenue. The project closed yesterday. So that transfer has occurred. So I'll give you a quick idea. With the Planning Commission, Carrie made a presentation, so I'll sort of cover both aspects of it. The project's on France Avenue opposite the Byerly, so it's 72nd in France. So that's the location where it sits on the west side of France. The parcel is this right here, which is, again, a 3-story office building built about 1950. It's been there for quite a while, and it's pretty much near the end of its life. There's a large surface lot that sits behind it, and then a grove of trees back here, which we intend to keep and maintain that as part of the project. So there'll be sort of a key element that we are going to work with. This just shows sort of the architectural elements we want to embed into the project. The idea of variation of the facade, and interested in that. Adding color and unique elements, architectural features, a grand entrance to the apartment, and then this one on the lower right is sort of shows the scale they want against the residential units. So the idea of the project steps from 6 stories down to 3 stories as you work to the west. Then this following one just shows ideas of this, and this is Hamilton Johnson did the idea that we've covered 100% of the parking. There's no exposed parking, and that's the same thing we wish to accomplish at 7200 France. This building we did that the mayor's kind enough to mention. At a vitamin shop that's on 70th in France, the idea of addressing the street. And this one we finished in St. Louis Park, which has a Mill Valley Inn, the idea of sort of creating some civic life and interest and a scale that adapts to France Avenue. So this just shows the building in context within the neighborhood. And what's to note is we're keeping this entire buffer intact through here, that all we're building on is what's the paved portion of the present site, which is basically a large parking lot at the west end and then a 3-story office building east end. So we basically kept the project in that footprint so that this buffer is absolutely uninterrupted and sort of a key. Every so often you get lucky when you come to a project and there's a natural buffer in place they can use, they don't have to create, and so that will be left intact. This shows the overall project, how it fits within the site, this being the 6-story portion, this wing being the 3-story portion, and then the landscape earth roof in the middle. With the basic ideas that we're using this component of this green spacing here, also workers of filtration for stormwater, so preliminary filtration. So the idea is our stormwater comes through this area, drains through, and goes in the sister system below, so it gets a nice scale element to it. And then other components is, the landscaping, the outdoor area along France, and the pedestrian element that's going to connect all the way through. So it has a nice scale. So the ideas we're thinking is a potential of solar on the roof, since we have good access to sunlight, and the major green effect. And so the idea is that all parking in this project is underground, that the only parking that's on the surface is a few drop-off spaces and obviously the lane that goes into the parking lot. The traffic aspect, and these are what these arrows represent, is that all our commercial traffic will enter the project off France Avenue. There'll be a drop-off lane, a common valet, and a garage. There'll be 2 levels of garage below it. So the idea is that all commercial traffic enters off France and exits off France. None comes on 72nd at all. And the other portion of it is that all our residential traffic will be in this one-way loop. And so what it means is that anyone that comes into this project will exit off a 72nd. No left turn will be allowed back onto that. So that is that no traffic will ever penetrate the neighborhood. So this will be a designated left turn. It'll be what they call a pork chop. So you're forced to make this action in, come around, come back out. So you cannot enter the neighborhood, and the plates will be separated. The 2 levels of underground park will be separated to prevent any kind of interaction between the commercial and residential, thus breaking the traffic into 2 zones so there's no stacking it. Either entry and allowing a free flow, but the key thing, this island which will protect the neighborhood so any traffic we generate cannot go through 72nd, cut past Carino, therefore, on the process. This is showing a figure ground to just show the building relation to France Avenue. The white represents a parking lot. The black represents buildings. The green represents green space. This is Sunrise Senior. This is the new Barley's across the way. And so the idea is that really to create a fully green site, have all our parking concealed, which is somewhat in contrast to the white that you see here, which is really what the France Avenue figure ground looks right now, where you see a very strong parking lot dominating environment. And so the idea is really want to start introducing the idea that it's a building within a green area, yet has a presence that holds a street edge that will allow use and activity to it. This shows the buildings in scale. So you get an idea of the building, how it sits within the context of France Avenue. The building is right here, again the 6-story, where it steps on the 3. This is right here, the Sunrise Seniors. This is the adjoining office building directly to our north. So this gives you an idea how it sits and fits within the environment in France and scales. This is just a document to show setbacks from the residential. And I just took a comparison of project that was recently approved, which is a large development, the Wick site, and ours. And so from the closest house, we're 140 feet back, and that goes to the 3-story portion of our building. And that green buffer, which you see in the slide above, or the picture above, that's what we tend to keep and enhance. So we're sort of blessed with a very strong break. And then this part that you see 6 stories, just the end of the building. So really this part is just 60 feet wide because it's perpendicular through the site. And so the main portion of the building, tall spot's over 300 feet away, and that's a part that fronts France. The Lennard, for example, just to show, where they didn't have the benefit of the natural buffer, that's a 6-story building, 120 feet away to the face of the adjoining house. And there did not have the benefit of any breaks, so it's lawn, street, and house. So we sort of went to really try to get the building mass. And that's one reason we have portions of it 6 stories, because we want to keep it low at the rear end of the site. So the idea of keeping all 4 stories and capping it, the idea is put the higher stories at the France Avenue, which is more appropriate, and then keep the lower portion of it this end. The project itself, to go through it, it is 195 residential units, 40 of them which are affordable. So 40 units of this project are affordable. And Lori Boyclair, in her part of the presentation, will go more in detail of how that works. The amount of commercial in this project is 26,000 square feet. To clarify, I think there was a memo that was put out by the city that actually had it at 45,005. So it's actually 26,000 square feet, not 45,000. So it's less than that. And then it's all self-parked underground, and this sort of shows the data, which I will go through. So architectural renderings, the idea is that the building's built on a podium. The front's variegated, the corner's cut out. There's outdoor dining in the corner. We have a restaurateur who wants to come in this area to offer what I call a casual tablecloth environment. And then the other retail then run along France Avenue. And this shows a higher part, and then it shows where it steps down to 3 stories. So the idea of the element, the variegation architecture, the scale, so it sort of has a lot of movement and action to it. It's not just a big box, an idea of creating the grand entry for the apartment and so forth. So this is a view looking into the courtyard, the earthworks portion, and the idea coming into the townhouse. A view looking along France Avenue to the north. And this is a commercial entry garage at that point. And this is a view looking at the project at the 3-story portion where it abuts the Sunrise Senior, and then here's the 6-story portion, and way on the right would be the single-family houses from there. Site plan, here's the commercial that wraps around the front of the site, residential along the back of the site, and this just shows the various floors going up, and then the 2 parking plates that are segregated. So that's sort of the basic layout of the building. And that's just the project sponsor, so I introduce, and then Bruce, you want to say a few words about the landscaping?
Thank you. I'm Bruce Johnson, and I'm going to be working on the gardens in the middle, the courtyard. And the top you'll see want to create a kind of a secret garden in the middle of this suburban environment. And I'm drawing inspiration from Central Park in the top, Minnehaha Falls, Minnehaha Creek, and even Centennial Lakes here. I want to create a lush environment inside of this courtyard. using three basic elements, the plants, stone, and water. I want to create an area where you can kind of get away from the hustle and bustle of your daily life and the stressful life that you have. And working with a smaller area, of course, it's going to be a lot more of an intimate experience, and I want to have a lot of movement through the garden, so I'm trying to create on that. Another goal is to develop a four-season area that can be experienced in the winter as well as the warmer seasons, if we have it here in Minnesota this year. Movement and the sound of the water complement the lush greenery of the plantings to create that relaxed feel for that area in there. In the winter, I want to use a stone, evergreens, plant material, and undulating contours to create its own unique look. You can do some very interesting things in a winter landscape that a lot of people don't do. Our goal is to create kind of an oasis off of France Avenue that will enable residents as well as the public to enjoy a few moments of tranquility. Thank you.
Bruce, thank you. And I'd like to introduce Lori Boyd-Claire, who is going to speak to the affordable aspects of the project.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, fellow council members. I'm going to just take a moment and ask my co-sponsor and co-developer to come in. I see he's arrived. I'm Lori Boyd-Claire. I'm co-sponsor, co-developer, along with Mr. Serafine, Adam Serafine here from NHH Properties. I'm president of Boyd-Claire Corporation. Boyd-Claire Corporation has been developing and managing real estate since 1974. Notably, one of our expertises is affordable housing, and we're on the Congressional Register for the first Section 8 opening and development in the U.S., here in Minnesota, and Robbins Landing in Robbinsdale. With our portfolio, we manage approximately 200 units, of which the majority are affordable housing. We have luxury housing, we have retail, we have hospitality, hotel, restaurants, and we have agricultural underneath our portfolio. As mentioned by Mr. Davalos, this component, or part of this development, does have an affordability component. What we are proposing is that we would come to the city for housing revenue bonds, which is no obligation to the city. They go to a unified state pool, of which with the bonds comes the right of a 4% low-income housing tax credit. That allows us the ability to partially gap what happens when you put affordability nature in a market rate project. So that allows us to be able to set aside units for affordability. That also allows us to possibly approach the city for tax increment financing to also help cover the gap and the disparity of being able on rental prices to have a lower rental price for an affordable unit than for a market unit, even though the units are of like kind. So all tenants will have like kind units. The affordable units will be set aside at 50% area median income. That equates from an average rental rate for market rate tenants of about $2.19 a foot down to an average of 81 cents for the affordable units. Now those affordable units are set aside, and in our portfolio of affordable housing, and what we find in the demographics here in Edina, those units are going to be able to provide housing for municipality workers, for teachers, for single parents, for elderly empty nesters, I have librarians, I have clergy, I have an array of tenant base. What we're proposing to do in this development is have those units be scattered. So they will be ones, twos, and threes. They won't be all on one floor. They won't be all the townhomes. They won't be all one bedrooms or two bedrooms. And with being able to provide affordable housing, it's a balancing act and it's a massage of the character of the building as well as the makeup of the building. And part of that is why the retail is an important component to this particular project. It allows for the first floor to have higher rent base, to be able to also subsidize the disparity in the mortgage for the affordable component. Also, when looking at this particular site, to put housing on the first floor facing France would be a detriment to the operations and also to the potential viability of the site on a long-term basis. So the retail component is very important as well to this particular development. Are there any questions?
Let me get Matt, and then we'll go to questions. Matt, so the last part of our presentation will be, Matt has done a preliminary traffic analysis of the site, so he's just going to report on that at a high level, so we sort of get a basis of what to discuss. So Matt, go ahead, and do you want the site plan to use?
Sure, if there's questions, it might work out well. My name is Matt Pacino with SRF Consulting. I'm a traffic engineer there. I was brought on just recently to kind of really take an independent review of the traffic impacts from a high level at this point. It's not a detailed operations analysis by any means, and I would assume that would be coming down the line. But just to give you a feel for some of the impacts and some of the issues that I've heard through the Planning Commission and discussions with the team, is that the primary issues have been cut-through traffic in the neighborhood and the right slip lane off of France Avenue. Those are the main ones that I've heard. There may be other ones that would like to be addressed as part of a study, but as part of the preliminary traffic analysis, the first thing I did is just looked at a real basic trip generation comparison. How does the office today generate trips versus the proposed land uses? And today, the office at about 39,000 square feet would generate about 500 daily trips. And the proposed land use, as expected, would increase that amount of trips, and we'd expect somewhere between about 2,500 daily trips, so an increase of about 5 times from what's currently there today. From an access standpoint, as Dean mentioned, the retail component will primarily be accessed off of France Avenue, and the residential component will be accessed off of 72nd. From a trip generation perspective, the retail component really makes up about 2/3 of that total trip generation. And the residential only makes up 1/3. So that kind of gives you an order of magnitude of who's going to be using France versus who would use 72nd. From a roadway capacity perspective, we just looked at it from a daily traffic number that's currently on France Avenue. The latest numbers that I had were about 28,000 vehicles per day. As we know, France Avenue is a 6-lane facility when it's not under construction. And so a 6-lane facility like France Avenue could realistically handle 40 to 50,000 cars a day. And so there is excess capacity in the roadway to handle some more development in the area. There wasn't any traffic data on 72nd Street at this time, so that would be something that would obviously want to be incorporated into a traffic study. The other component then was looking at kind of the neighborhood impacts, and at the looking at the site plan here, we would estimate there is a certain amount of traffic that may want to come from the west or go to the west, but really with the designing the median, it really tries to limit those types of impacts. It's not to say that there won't be vehicles that'll make illegal maneuvers, but that comes down to a compliance issue and an enforcement issue. And so based on the site plan, it looks like they're trying to do what they can to really limit impacts to the neighborhood. And that just goes with setting up the one-way operations for the internal roadway, setting up the parking access points where they are, so the retail would really come off France. That's really all looks like, from my perspective, it's designed at limiting impacts to 72nd Street. One other component that I would actually recommend to help reduce impacts is being a good neighbor and developing some travel demand management strategies. So, developing information packets that you can hand out to residents, employees, to kind of be that good neighbor and say, you know what, try to avoid driving down 72nd Street if you can, different things like that. And so,
No.
Hey, folks, no outbursts, please.
The final comment, or the issue that was brought up, was the right slip lane off of France. And so some of the concerns with that, are the proximity to 72nd. It's about about 125 feet away from that. And so how that interaction with vehicles entering and exiting the slip ramp, as well as the proximity to 72nd Street, is something that would want to get looked at as part of a traffic study. In its current configuration, a right in, right out on France, it's kind of your least amount of conflict points. It's not a full access by any means. It's not even in the 3/4 like it is at 32nd. So it kind of reduces your potential conflict points between vehicles. It does provide that alternative access to the development, so it kind of helps, like I talked about, is reducing some of the impacts from a traffic perspective onto 72nd. Some of the things that I mentioned earlier today to the group was that you want to make sure your site distance, as you design your access points and your landscaping plan, you want to make sure your site distance is still adequate. I mean, that's a critical component to operations and safety. And then the last component is just the northbound movement and making a left turn, and it would create more of a U-turn maneuver. And since France is 6 lanes or 3 lanes in the southbound direction, that does provide enough width for those U-turn maneuvers. But as part of any traffic study or anything like that, it would be good to review truck maneuvers to make sure that as service vehicles or anything else does turn in that access point, that they can maneuver accordingly. So with that, that's essentially the preliminary traffic operations analysis that was completed. A detailed analysis could go into much more information and would provide a lot more solid results at this point. But from a high-level perspective, that's what I'm seeing from a traffic perspective.
All right. Thank you, Matt.
So that concludes our presentation. So I'll be available for questions and comments. So thank you.
We'll have questions in a moment, but I wanted to walk back through with Carrie Teague, our Community Development Director, the sketch plan experience at the Planning Commission, and what some of the concerns were that the Planning Commission raised, and any concerns that staff might have. That might help Council too with some guidance on questions for the development team. Thank you.
Certainly. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the Council. This request will require a number of comprehensive plan amendments, 3 of them. Our comprehensive plan guides this site for 4 stories and 48 feet. And the proposal here is 6 stories and 80 feet. So that's the first comp plan amendment. The density allowed in the comprehensive plan allows up to 30 units per acre. The proposal here is for 50 units an acre. So that's the second amendment. The floor area ratio in this one, I think staff has concern over, and the Planning Commission expressed some as well. The floor area ratio that's allowed on this site is 0.5. This site is currently zoned planned office district, and 0.5 is the maximum. And the proposal here is for 1.88, so quite a significant increase over what's allowed currently. So with all of that, what they're proposing to do would be a rezoning from that planned office district to planned unit development, where we would write the specific regulations in a zoning ordinance specifically for that site. So that would be the zoning that they would seek in this case. So some of the concerns that were raised by the Planning Commission were in regard to the height and density. There was some concern about traffic, and the graphic on the screen, I think, alleviates some of the concerns that were expressed by the Planning Commission with the traffic through the residential area. And again, a traffic study would be needed. Some mentioned podium height. They suggested that be required on the France side. So there were some concerns in that regard. But I think that's all I can think of at the moment. Height and density seem to be the main concerns.
Okay. Questions for Director Teague at this point in time? Right. Yep. Member Sprague, do you want to lead us off?
Thank you, Your Honor. I echo the concerns of the Planning Commission on the intensity of the land use, both from the height and massing perspective. And I know you brought up Lennar, but the end product in Lennar was a very different project than what we see before us tonight. In addition, that site was different, and I think we need to look at the intensity of the land use and the site plan on a case-by-case basis. So here, I think it's way out of scale. I'm not sure. What's the building to the south, that office building? What's the height on that 6-story?
Yeah, I believe it's a 4-story building, and I just took a quick rough estimate off Google Earth, and it looks like it's about 45 to 50 feet tall. Again, that's just a rough estimate.
So that's just another building along the streetscape that gives you an idea of the scale and the character of France. We also invested $4 million in making France more pedestrian friendly, and the front streetscape of this building does not make the mark. To me, preserving the cut-in does a disservice. I don't think that does anything. I bike and walk along there with my son who bikes with me, and it's difficult enough to get across there and feel safe. I think what we want to do is improve the streetscape for the pedestrian in front of your building, and so I would eliminate that cut-in and make a really lush, welcoming and safe pedestrian environment. I like the bump out on the curb and that big plaza, and I think I would extend that all the way down. Also, in relation to mass, podium on France, and it was mentioned in planning, is going to make a huge difference. And by podium, I don't mean a 1 to 2 foot setback. Really take a look at what we encouraged on that Lennar project, and I think you'll see that there can be some more intense use of that will affect not only how the pedestrian feels, but the entire perceived mass of that front door of the project. On circulation, I can tell you, using 72nd to get out of that neighborhood myself, there's going to be a real issue. I don't know how you're going to solve it. I don't know if this, the way that it appears here is not the solution. Even if you force people to take that right, the people when coming back off 100 are still going to come, and they'll cut through the neighborhood to get to that destination. I already get complaint calls from in front of the school on Cornelia from drivers, rushing down that street. And I don't see how this will help it with this current configuration. You almost would have to dead end 72nd at your project so no one can get in or out, and then figure out a way to make that convenient for people to get out at the stoplight at Hazelden, some other major configuration to make it work. And then in terms of the alternatives to car to try to encourage non-motorized transportation, I'd like to see some real thought given to beefing up bike facilities within the building. Think about, we don't have transit we have some bus transit. We don't have a real beefy transit system like in Minneapolis. And they're doing bike parking inside the building on a 1-to-1 ratio. They're also doing bike repair rooms. They call them bike kitchens. But basically, they're just trying to encourage that alternative mode so that people don't need to do the short trips in their cars, and we don't need to add to all of the current congestion that's already in the area. I'll mention as well in that regard that next year, in 2015, we will have a comprehensive Greater Salto Area Transportation Study coming forward, which I just learned from our engineer. And then the final piece is, again, this gets back to the intensity of the land use, the density and the lot coverage. You showed those graphics of sunrise, and I understand that this may not be a sunrise, but the contrast is striking with how much green space they have. Now it's a less intense land use, and maybe the economics were different then, and I'm not sure if you're trying to give yourself a density bonus in order to pay for the affordable housing, but either way, there needs to be a better balance struck between the housing and the retail on the site and the rest of the site plan devoted to stormwater management and to recreation for the residents. This is something that happened again on the Lennar process. If you look at the front end, it was a big, square, highly dense building with very little green space and community space, and the end product ended up to be much different.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I was around actually for Sunrise. Someone wrote that was maybe before all of us. I was on the Planning Commission then, so I do remember that. It was a different time and land cost, different amounts. But for me, this is too tall. It is not a Lennar project. Lennar doesn't go through to the back street. It only comes, you only enter it off of Xerxes York. The part of Lennar that faces the residents in Richfield is is a townhouse look, so I like that concept that you had, but you've got 3-story townhouses. Those are pretty tall. I like the fact that there's that green buffer. 6 stories is too much for me. The density is too much for me, and the fire is too much for me. The other thing that I know you need the retail and the restaurant to make it work dollar-wise, but we don't have that there. We went through a huge thing on Planning Commission, even when we put together room and board and whatever both of those stores were, so that we had retail kind of there, and even when the mortuary decided that they wanted to expand. So I like the idea of having affordable housing for teachers and nurses, and we've talked about that a lot in our city. But this asks too much for the neighborhood to have to take on to make that happen. So where it stands today, I don't support it.
Thank you. Member Bennett?
Okay. Likes, dislikes, and concerns. I do like the affordable housing very much. It's really, really needed. We have a goal of 212 units. We know that the need in the community is greater. It's young people, it's old people, it's people in all kinds of occupations in the community. One of the things that we learned during the comp plan process is as many people come into the community to work every day as live here. And if we can find a way to avoid them having to cross paths, both in terms of going out to work elsewhere or people more, I think what's occurring is people who don't live in the community coming into work. The more that we can do that, I think the more we're going to address some of our traffic issues. I also think that people sometimes have misconceptions about affordable housing. They see something like Cabrini Green, the projects in New York and Chicago that didn't work. I really like the thoughtful way that you've described it and the fact that you're talking about even within a multi-unit building clusters of 2 and 3 units, because I think we're learning that that's what works. It's integrated into the community. And these are us, the people needing and wanting to live in them. I also like the fact that what you're proposing for affordable housing will not displace already existing relatively affordable housing, which a lot of projects that are proposed do. It's a cheaper building, it's going to be built, it's going to be bought, demolished, and something built, but you're replacing one for one. You're not, if that, and you're not gaining any new. And so I do really like that. I like the variety of housing options that you are describing, the townhomes, the different size of units. I like the replacement of asphalt with green space. I like the green buffer. I dislike the amount of variance requested. It's huge. It is really huge. I differ, I think, from my colleagues and probably planning commissioners in, I see the need for podium for reduction of height on France, but I would rather see that reduction of height away from the neighborhood. I would rather see the step down that you have than the step down the other direction with a step up toward the neighborhood and lower on France. But I still am concerned about the height mass combinations, and also I think in the what we have in the comp plan is 12 stories per height, so even with 6 stories you're 8 feet over what that number would be of 72. The traffic is a huge concern, and I get it, and it's like water, and I like what you showed us tonight for the design where you're going to try to steer people so that people whose destination is the building will come to the building. I agree with my colleagues that we really have, the whole community is experiencing the effect of what will hopefully be a very much more walkable France Avenue, and we don't want to move back off that direction with any new construction or design. And the neighborhood traffic, I went out, I visited, I see what the connections are. I'm not a fan of street closure. In fact, I think that part of the issue is there are so few routes in and out of the neighborhood that it intensifies the use on the routes that still exist. But that's your issue. That's an issue that you have just bought and will be addressing. How then do you France Avenue is I believe an appropriate location for multi-unit housing, but how do you build it in such a way that you don't have undue impact on the neighborhood behind the playground, the school, and right now that roadway is going to be used as people fear it's going to be used, which is it's going to be a back entrance to the building. Finally, my concerns. I think we need to better understand the impacts. I know that if this comes forward, there would be refinement and we would get more information. But we need to understand, not only understand the impacts, but have better mitigations. On the infrastructure, we need to understand better the impact on when something of this size is requested. Well, we need to understand those impacts, and I'm concerned about the impacts. I asked our planning director for information on what we have for goals, what's been built. I think we had a housing goal of somewhere over 1,000 new units. We've built 329 since 2009. An additional 332 are under construction, and an additional 549 have been approved but not yet built. So we need to be paying attention to our infrastructure, sewers, water supply, water treatment. And finally, I do think that there were some sincere questions raised about impact on the school in the sense of, I think the district has been doing some very good long-range planning. What happens if there is enrollment rise at a school, and I know that there are families dwelling in apartments all over our city. So another thing that we need to understand, and do appreciate the design of the building and appreciate very much the intention to provide housing to more people who deserve to live in good places.
Thank you.
Member Brindle.
Thanks. Just out of the box, I just wish we could erase the word affordable out of our vocabulary and put workforce there, because that's really what this is. It addresses housing that allows people who work here to live here. A great majority of the staff, police officers, firefighters, nurses, whether it's the hospital or here, the professionals who keep our city running and safe and healthy, can't live here. So this would be an effort in that direction from an apartment standpoint. My comments are going to sound much the same. It's a beautiful design. If you had the space that it took for this, if you had the distance from residential that provided the buffer for this to exist, it would be great. I think we'd still have some of the same comments, however, because if you're walking along the street at this building, it's really, much as it's not 18 stories, it's 6 stories, but it's still going to tower. And so having some effort to step back, have some greenery that you can look up and see, it is going to soften that. And so I think that would be important. This is going to be a terrible pun, but 1.88 is too far from 0.5. So there you go. That said, as I mentioned earlier in a conversation, when I have gone out for a proposal on things that I have worked on, I've asked for the moon, knowing that I was going to find something in the middle. So maybe that's a strategy here. And if it is, then maybe something in the middle is going to be reasonable, but 1.88 is too much. You are adjacent on the west. Everybody knows this, but I'll say it anyway. You're adjacent to the west to single-family homes. All the rest is street and commercial. You are kind of kitty corner from Cedars of Edina, which is really a very large and sprawling apartment complex. So does it fit here? I think in concept it does. It just needs to fit here in size. I would welcome it as long as the traffic patterns entered and exited off of France and not 72nd. I don't know how we can do that and keep that pedestrian streetscape. I think that's one of your greatest challenges. But I would not want to put the entrance and exit for the residential off of 72nd. I would try not to do that. If it meant ramping up and around to get people up and around to finally get back, I have no idea how you're going to do that. But it's too much on 72nd. I've been there. It is, as mentioned before, there are few accesses to France from that neighborhood, and this is one of them. The landscaping, great ideas. I'd love to see some of that on the outside of the building, not just on the interior. And that would provide that kind of that is needed in that area. And then I applaud maintaining any of the buffer that you can maintain. Thank you.
Thank you.
Excuse me. Thank you. Approach it a little bit like Member Bennett does. There are many pluses here, in my mind. The 3.8 acre site, 8 acre site is a very nice, generously sized piece of property. I like the fact that you're only 140 feet, or that you are all the way back 140 feet from the closest house on the west side. Whether that should be a 3-story building or a 2-story building, you've got some heights imposed there, 35 feet versus 46 feet. The 35-foot height level feels a little bit more comfortable to me. The site itself, I think it was probably part of the old gravel pit from down in that area. There's that little dish in the middle of it behind the building itself. I think that promotes what you want to accomplish here in terms of sort of setting it down in its site. It promotes the use of that underground parking, which I think is a great idea to get cars off the street. That's another big plus in terms of appeal to me. The design, of course, as Member Brindle mentioned, is beautiful. The things that you bring to this council, some are built, some aren't. They're always gorgeous in their design. So the west side, I would look at some of those height issues there. The courtyard is gorgeous. As Member Brindle said, the landscape architect description by Mr. Johnson I thought was excellent, and I'm glad to see that you're looking at so many of these landscaping issues and want to improve the greenscape, if you will, of the Southdale district, because there is very little green in that district, as you pointed out in one of your presentations. So again, the parking underground is a big plus. I think the entrance off France Avenue into the parking garage is a good idea. I don't share some of the same concerns that Member Sprague shares with respect to that cutout or that cut-in, if you will. I think you can adjust sidewalks and greenscape to accommodate that and still have the sort of outdoor dining that you're promoting here. I also am not averse to retail on the west side. We've got some scattered retail along there. We've got a furniture store not too far away. Down the way a little bit, we approved a restaurant site on the old National Car site. So integrating a little bit of retail in the form of restaurants here, I think actually might be a nice touch for the neighborhood. The affordability part of it, I liked a lot. I think if the height ends up coming down, which I think you've heard most of the council members indicate, that would be good to know how that affects the affordable units, number of units. I think all of us on this council have wrestled for years on what to do in terms of affordable housing, because in Edina it's just very, very difficult to do. And I applaud Ms. Boyclair on coming forward with this idea of creating some substantial number of units for affordability. It means a lot to us. And so we have to kind of work through that issue as well. I was glad to hear that there were 26,000 square feet of retail instead of 45,000 square feet of retail. I was also pleased to hear that the 6-story portion was 300 feet from the single-family residences beyond the berm and beyond all that landscaping, which I think is an excellent buffer and fortuitous for you. But nonetheless, the density is an issue, I think, and we did 4 stories on that west side when we did the comp plan in 08 for a reason, because of the transition into the single-family neighborhood. We also did it on the east edge between York and Xerxes, but there's a lot of scattered height in there already, which made it a little bit more comfortable for us to think about going from 4 stories to 6 stories on the Wick site, and then all the other building adjustments that were made to kind of cause all the traffic to enter and exit off of York. As Member Swenson pointed out, you don't have that situation here. You could have some potential traffic issues. I applaud you for trying to figure out a solution to defer traffic, to keep it from going into the neighborhood and creating that turnabout in the courtyard itself. For me, the use is appropriate. The density is an issue. Impacts on infrastructure, as Member Bennett spoke to, I think we'll have to, of course, look at those just like we always do with respect to stormwater management, with respect to sewer capacity, with respect to transportation. I think the preliminary work that your traffic consultant did, of course, is somewhat helpful. But we hire, for folks in the audience, we hire somebody to do that work for us at the developer's expense. So we're getting that information. They may have their own traffic consultant as well, but we have ours as well to do the analysis that needs to be done and to look at everything on a compounding or incremental basis to make sure that the roadways can sustain the volume of traffic involved. So I hope that's helpful to you. If we went the PUD route, I would just comment again, the floor area ratio I'd have to think about. We've increased density in the Southdale district, and part of it's driven by land costs, but part of it's driven by the demands of people from different generations, whether it's baby boomers or millennials. People are looking for different kinds of housing stock, and when you read articles on a national basis about the density issues we're going to face in inner cities and first-ring suburbs, you have to pay attention to that, because we not only have to be thinking about our single-family residences, which occupy the majority of the space in Edina, appropriately so, in these R1 zones, but we're going to see more and more demand, I think, from younger people for the ability to live in a more dense environment with a lot of amenities around it, and you can see some of that happening in the Southdale district now. And so this is going to be interesting. You've kind of pushed the envelope, if you will, on height and density, and it feels like, from what the council is saying, we're not quite ready to go that far yet. So you can take that for what it's worth. So the PUD, I think I'd be willing to work with that concept. The building height, the housing density, and then the floor area ratio, as Director Teague mentioned, are things I'd have to think about if you decide to come back with a plan for the property. And it sounds like you might, since you bought the property.
Yeah. Hey, can't go back.
Yeah. So
it's not a very good office building.
Yeah, no, the office building that there is not good, and I'm sure whatever gets built there will be a tremendous improvement. But you can see from the folks that are in the audience, everybody in that neighborhood has a tremendous interest in what happens there. They would be your neighbors as well as neighbors and fellow citizens of ours. So we just need to keep all that in mind as we advance the ball here on the next phase here. And we'll look forward to seeing what you come back with.
Thank you very much.
Anybody have any questions for any members of the development team? And Ms. Boykler, maybe you could come up. I don't know if you are prepared to answer. Well, never mind. We'll take this as it goes. I was going to ask you an affordable housing question, but it can wait.
Anyway, thank you.
Thank you.
We're excited about the project, and thank you for taking the time to give us feedback and review. And likewise, when you come back, work with the neighbors, work with the council, work with the planning commission to keep shaping this project and put it together. So again, appreciate your time and insight. Thank you.
All right. Thanks, Mr. DeVolis. All right. The next matter we're going to take up is the potential approval of the final alignment for the 9 Mile Creek Regional Trail.
Harvey?
All right, folks. Next matter on the agenda is the proposed final alignment for the 9 Mile Creek Regional Trail. That work has all been done by the Three Rivers Park District, along with some assistance from our staff. And Chad Milner, our Director of Engineering, has this topic.
Mayor, members of the council, I think I'll just hand it right off to Three Rivers Park District, and I'll let them introduce themselves and their consultant.
All right, thank you. Welcome.
Thank you. Mr. Mayor and council members, thank you for your time. I'm Eric Nelson, Senior Manager of Engineering with Three Rivers Park District and the Project Manager for 9 Mile Creek Regional Trail in Edina. With me tonight is Jonathan Vlaming, our Associate Superintendent, and Toby Muse, our Design Consultant from SEH.
Good to see you again, Mr. Nelson.
Good to see you. Thank you.
Yeah.
Here's a quick outline of what I'm going to talk about tonight. I'm going to step through all the maps of the 7.5 mile trail through Edina. I'll give you an update on what has changed since you saw us last in March and talk about where we stand with some of the easement acquisitions or any other highlights along the route. I'll give you an update on our public participation efforts to date. We'll talk timeline moving forward, and then I have questions at the end, but again, feel free to interrupt me whenever you'd like if it's okay with you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you.
So leading off on the west end of the project here at 169, we start off with a significant change from the master plan route, and I believe you were all updated on this through the Friday report. But in summary, the trail used to pass up here and was proposed to go underneath Highway 169. As we looked into the hydraulics of 9 Mile Creek, flood elevations, there are some existing utilities at that spot. Just found out early in the game that that wasn't going to work anymore, so we've moved on to an alternative route that passes down the east side of Smetana Drive in Minnetonka. There's an 8-foot wide sidewalk there that will be used in the interim condition, and we're working on an agreement with the city of Minnetonka such that when they go to reconstruct Smetana Drive, we could partner on a more conventional 10-foot wide asphalt regional trail with the appropriate clear zones and things of that nature. From there, the trail comes down to Brent Road and will pass over 169 on the recently constructed bridge or interchange at 169. And that reconstruction came through all the way down here to Lincoln Drive. At this point, the trail will cross Lincoln Drive and Londonderry Drive and enter onto the
Mr.
former...
Nelson, before you go to the next slide, and I've been over the new bridge many times, but what's the width of the bike lane
It is
on the bridge?
It's 8 feet wide with 2-foot shoulders on either side, and that meets the minimums required for regional trail standards.
Right.
From there, the trail enters onto the former United Health property, and that is back here. That is a spot where we will need an easement from that landowner. It's currently for sale, as I'm sure you're all well aware, but been in discussions with the landowner, and I would characterize them as positive so far, so no real concerns there. Moving forward, we come through a large wetland complex on the south side of 9 Mile Creek, cross at a pedestrian bridge, this location, and come up and run parallel to Londonderry Drive. This is a slight modification from the last set of maps you saw. The trail was proposed to come up and around this wetland lobe and then come back onto the existing trails in Walnut Ridge Park. When we did the wetland delineation, we found that the wetland boundary was much further north than we had assumed during design, and there really wasn't room to go far enough north and avoid it. So rather than introduce all the conflicts with this parking lot and the building up here, we decided to just span that wetland with boardwalk and tie into the existing Walnut Ridge Trail here. This trail would be widened from 8 feet to 10 feet to meet regional trail standards, but follow the same alignment as the existing trail in Walnut Ridge. Enter into this large wetland complex, again a boardwalk structure, and then continue down to the intersection of Vernon Avenue and Gleason Road. So we left off right here. This is a signalized intersection, so we plan to, there may be modifications to pole locations and things like that. But generally, the intent is to have the signal function in the same manner as it does now. It's got a crosswalk there as well. From there, the trail will pass along the east side of Gleason Road. We've met with the county a couple times to talk about our needs there. In order to fit the trail within the existing highway right-of-way, we have to narrow up Gleason Road. And so the east curb line will move in and the lanes will be restriped. So there'll be the same number of lanes. It's just there's a 5-foot shoulder on either side, and that will be narrowed up in order to fit the regional trail within the right-of-way.
Do you know if they're going to reconstruct that segment, or is it just a mill and overlay? And how do they do that?
Well, they're going to move the curb line over to the west to allow room for the regional trail to meet those minimum requirements of the trail with 8 feet and 2 feet on each side.
Correct.
And then the road surface itself is milled and overlaid?
They just did that last year, so they would probably be able to cut a nice straight line and just put the curb right up to that saw cut line.
Okay.
We'd have to work through that, but they just overlaid that last year.
Thanks.
So no easement.
I'm sorry, I was thinking about a lady over on Aspen Road that wanted to make sure that the pathway didn't come too close to her house. Looks like you accomplished that, but I forgot to listen when you were talking about getting across Vernon. Is that at grade?
It is.
All right, thank you.
From there, the trail continues. Oh, I'm sorry. No easements are needed from these. I think there are 8 properties on Gleason Road. Trail continues south along the east side of Gleason Road, and I believe where I have the cursor, correct me if I'm wrong, that's about the extent of where the road reconstruction ends, Toby? So it's not the whole length, but it's about from the intersection of Glacier Place to the north, where we'd be moving that curb line. Trail continues to the south and enters into Bredesen Park.
Question on that, Eric. You are going into a really narrow roadway area there, where that curve is just to the north of Crosstown.
Mm-hmm.
And are you on the trail at this point, or are you in a bike lane?
We are off-road.
You're off-road at this point?
We are,
okay,
yes.
Great, thank you.
And this whole segment to the north is off-road as
It
well.
is all off-road. Okay,
Yes.
and that's the result of moving. I wondered just what, okay, great, thank you.
There's not enough off-road space between the back of curb and the property line right now, so we had to move curb line in. Right. So at this point, we tie into the existing trails in Bredesen Park. Right now, they have 2 separated trails, one for walking, one for biking. We presented to the park board on 2 different occasions, talked through some options, and we agreed to utilize the existing bike trail for the regional trail. It will be widened from 8 feet to 10 feet, and that will require the park department to convert all the trails to 2-way traffic within Bredesen Park in order to avoid a very confusing traffic configuration. And given that there are 2 separate trails for those 2 different types of users with that amount of paved width, we felt like that was more than adequate to keep there's enough room for everybody to coexist safely. So Park Board had no issue with that design. So it will follow the existing bike trail alignment through down to here, and right about somewhere in here we'll have to start the new bridge over 9 Mile Creek. So the walking path and the biking path will come together, pass over the creek, and then this will all be a bridge to make the transition up to get over Highway 62. And then what you don't see on this map is that the bridge then extends east as well to tie the walking path and the biking path back down to the existing trails in Bredesen Park. So it's kind of a T-shaped bridge.
So they can still do a 2-way loop, or they can jump on and keep going on the regional system at the park?
That's correct. Okay. So this is a bridge over Highway 62. And from there we enter into the school district property. We met with school district staff a couple times. When they first saw the route, they had some concerns about their cross-country ski trail network that they groom in the winter, and if the decision was ever made to clear snow from this trail, would that present a bunch of obstacles to the cross-country ski network? We worked with staff and we came up with a slightly revised alignment that eliminated a lot of crossings, and where it couldn't, it was located such that they could make slight revisions to their ski network and still make it work. So that was acceptable to staff, and I believe on June 19th, the school board passed the resolution of approval for this route.
Eric, could you go back to the bridge across 62 for a moment
Sure.
and talk a little bit about the bridge design and the grade change, the degree of incline, those kinds of things, or is that too premature yet?
We know that the profile slopes on the trail would be designed to meet ADA guidelines, 5% or less. I think we know that that'll be precast concrete beam bridge. I think we have to be 18'4" above the freeway for truck passage, and that includes future overlays of the highway. Trail width would be 12-foot clear, and that's consistent with the guidelines we have to meet for the federal trail. It would have railing, some type of ornamental railing on the top. So is that?
It's helpful. Yeah.
Okay. If there's anything more, I
so
can.
It's going to be ADA compliant, and that should,
without a doubt, yes,
be good for everybody in terms of being able to climb up to the 18.4 level and get back down with a gentle sort of incline.
Yeah, it's fortunate that existing grades over on this side are relatively high, so there's less transition that we have to make up on the south end.
Okay.
So trail passes along the north and east side of this athletic field and north side of the soccer field around this wetland area, and then starting about here becomes boardwalk again, pedestrian bridge over the creek at this location, and it would be boardwalk throughout the extent of this map. And so we left off right about here. From here we enter an area actually right at this line where we need a private easement. This is New City Covenant Church, and we've started discussions with them, positive so far. We're continuing forward with the appraisal process, and really have no reason to think at this point that easement will be any kind of an issue. The trail then runs parallel to the entrance road where it currently sits, and then will run parallel to Tracy Avenue on the west side, again off-street. The crossing of Tracy Avenue is a challenge for sure. We talked with city staff about several options. Three-way stop is not warranted there based on the amount of traffic approaching from the east. Of course, the stoplight isn't either then. We are looking at possibility of incorporating some sort of median refuge island on Tracy Avenue so that a trail user doesn't need to look for a gap across both directions. They can cross southbound, get out to the median, and then cross northbound. We're also exploring possibility of rectangular flashing beacons, some sort of advance notice, definitely on the south side of the intersection as you approach on northbound Tracy through this Valley View Road, I guess it is, on this curve.
I have a question and I have a suggestion. The question or the comment would be a center island. I mean, speeding traffic to and from the high school is a real issue there. So a center island could be useful in a number of ways. Also, have you looked at possibly a pedestrian activated stoplight? Does that need to have stoplight warrants, or could something that would be operated by a pedestrian or a bicyclist on foot be appropriate?
Like I have at Valley View and Concord.
Member Bennett, that's real similar to the rectangular flashing beacon. So the pedestrian would go up, push the button, it would flash to let.
Well, it actually does a red. 102nd by the high school in Bloomington has one where the traffic actually has to come to a stop. So it's not just a flasher, it's an actual
I guess we haven't got up to that level. That again would need specific warrants, and they have a transportation engineering looking at it. We just met on this intersection last week. They need some more traffic counts and crash data, and we're getting that to them shortly to see where that warrants what level of safety device.
Have them only count between 2 and 4 in the afternoon, and it's 7 and 9 in the morning, and you'll have your warrants.
Yeah, thank you.
The Midtown Greenway has some interesting treatments on the east side of Hiawatha, where they they come across some pretty busy roads, and
Okay. I guess in summary, we're entertaining all those possibilities, and definitely recognize that it's an intersection of concern without a doubt. And we heard that from residents in this area as well. Moving forward, the trail runs along the south side of Valley View Road. Again, all off-street. There's an existing pedestrian bridge that crosses Nine-Mile Creek right in here that would have to get replaced. It's not wide enough to carry a regional trail. The trail will run parallel to Valley Lane on the south side until right about here, where it transitions into the boardwalk creek-based route that proceeds to the southeast. This is where just short of half of our residents that we mailed out information about screening, I think 31 of the 77 fell within this corridor. So east side of Creek until this area, pedestrian bridge to cross over here where it runs parallel to Heights Park. This would be an access point to the regional trail here at Heights Park. There's also a paved, it's signed walk your bikes through this area. That would be a point of connection as well.
Does that tie into the existing, there's some type of access already on Valley Lane that has fencing on?
Yes, that's
okay.
what I'm speaking
that's what he's talking
yeah.
about.
Yeah, you can kind of see the path here that proceeds. I think it's right between these two properties. Another pedestrian bridge here, and south of this point, the trail is entirely on the east side of the creek. No easements needed in this section, other than the church that I talked about before.
In that section where you send out a lot of mailings asking people if they wanted fencing or bushes or trees, what kind of response out of the X number of, were there, I can't remember how many lots you told me that touched the trail?
Sure. I've got some slides upcoming with some
I'll wait
stats,
for that,
but
then.
I can. You
Thanks.
sure? Okay. Next slide demonstrates another pretty significant change to the master plan route. In case you don't recall, there was an underpass proposed to go underneath the railroad tracks right here, and the trail would then run along the north side of Abercrombie Park and continue to the east. As we look closer at this crossing, learn that there is limited clearance between the railroad tracks and the creek itself, same gamut of floodplain issues, and just decided that crossing location wasn't going to work. And as we looked for other feasible alternatives, there were very few. In fact, we thought only one viable option, which is what you see here. The trail continues south, parallel to the tracks. We will need an easement from this apartment building owner here on the north side of 70th. We've started that discussion, and it also has gone favorably to this point. The trail would then pass underneath 70th Street, underpass structure, and then use this parcel to wrap around and make up the grade change between the ground elevations in this area and 7th Street. There's, I want to say, 30 to 35 feet of elevation difference there. So this length you see is what we need to make up that difference and still have ADA accessible profile grades and have the turn radius, the turn radii that we need to meet the design standards. So right now, this is it's a tax forfeited parcel. Public Works uses that to stockpile street sweepings and other type material there. We've been in several discussions with staff about how to solve that, and we're working through alternative locations for the city to replace this site, essentially. Any questions about that? That's usually the attention grabber.
How is something like that signed? It's a great trail so far with little of this, and I know that in, I think it was maybe in Bloomington, that there was some concern raised about a trail segment that involved. So what kind of signage is provided for this kind of turning movement? For the loop, yep.
You know, it really seems like a good candidate. I think you're speaking to directional signage as opposed to safety
Directional
signs?
or warnage signs, just so people maybe slow down their speed or that kind of thing.
Sure. Well, as it's designed, it doesn't have any design parameters that are outside the guidelines. But that being said, we would certainly evaluate it for either directional signs or or speed advisory signs, curve ahead signs. That's part of the traffic engineering effort that Toby and his crew will certainly look at as we move forward into final design.
Sure, and again, the design is to ADA compliance. so-
Absolutely, yes.
Thank you.
There's a,
Go ahead.
yeah, I was just to say, there's a segment like that up at the top of the hill near Highland Reserve where that off-street trail comes under, and there's a curve, and I don't think there's any signage on that segment. You don't know the one I'm talking about, but it's at the top of the hill as you go up on East Bush Lake Road.
Okay,
And
on
then
the
you get
city
to that
trail?
stoplight where Highwood neighborhood is or whatever, and then just before the nature center, there's that little segment that comes and goes underneath. So it looks like about that same turn radius.
Right.
I'm assuming there'd be some beautification effort there.
We think, yeah, there would. Jonathan, would you like to speak to that? Or now's the time.
Let's hear about that, unless you want to have this Gobi Desert effect.
Yeah, right now it's not the most beautiful site. We talked about pocket parks and that idea, but the view from there is pretty much of an industrial area, especially there's a large power station adjacent. What I do envision is doing some sort of stormwater pond type within the actual circle of the trail going up. Put in some native plantings. There is some stormwater issues in the area, so it'll help with that. It'll be nice to look at, but it's not the kind of place we want to put in a picnic table, really. Not for that stretch.
Our Public Works thinks that's a beautiful piece of land right there.
Thank you. So we come back up to at grade on 70th Street, and from there the trail continues along the south side of 70th Street, again off-street. We will need easements from XL Energy and the next property to the east, which I'll talk about on the next map. This map that you see on the overhead represents a change from what went out in your council packet, and that's due to a recent development. I have, I gave Chad some hard copies, and I also could...
We handed it out.
Okay, okay.
So you're going to go behind the apartment?
We are.
The condo building?
We are, yes. There are 4 parcels on the west side of the creek, but 3 property owners, so we'll need to negotiate easements with those property owners. We needed an easement on the north side from this property owner anyway, so we had to have that discussion anyway, and they own the next parcel to the south here. We started to reach out to these property owners, and they have questions, but no real concerns have been give us any anxiety about this redesign so far. The parcel on the south here at the intersection of 72nd and Ohms, we understand has been vacant for quite a while, so we haven't been able to connect with that property yet, but we're working toward that, starting that discussion. We do need to narrow up 72nd Street where the creek passes underneath. Right now there's only a 6-foot walk behind the back of curb on the bridge over the creek. The city recently milled and overlaid this segment of road, but didn't only put down a centerline stripe, acknowledging that it was wise to wait and figure out where exactly the trail was going. And I hear that there are other traffic issues going on in this area. So we met with staff and feel like there's a solution here that will work. From here, we cross 72nd Street, and any questions about this area? Okay. From here, we cross 72nd Street, pass along the south side of Metro Boulevard, and right about where I have the cursor now is where the bridge will begin in this area. The trail will be bridged over Metro Boulevard and Highway 100 at this spot. This is the bridge crossing location is a slight change from the master plan. We always were showing a bridge, but I think it was more down here in the master plan. Mm-hmm. It's shifted north slightly, but that's to alleviate other problems on Metro Boulevard. From here, the trail passes along Lake Edina on the west side and comes into the area where it will run parallel to the entrance ramp from 77th Street to northbound Highway 100. This was segment 19.
How do you separate the trail from that ramp then?
There'll be, so behind the curb on the entrance ramp, there'll be a 9-foot snow storage area for MnDOT.
Yep.
And then there will be a 56-inch concrete barrier like you see in between northbound and southbound directions on a freeway, the precast concrete barrier.
It's a great
and there
question.
will be,
It's a tight
Okay.
spot in there.
it is.
So you can't put anything higher there than that?
There will be a chain link fence on top of that as well, which MnDOT requires just to prevent people from climbing the concrete barrier and going onto the ramp for whatever you'd want to do that. I don't know, but
Okay.
so
You don't need any easements through there?
just from MnDOT.
Yeah.
We may need small temporary easements in order to, so it'll be concrete barrier, 14 feet of pavement for the trail, and then we're starting the discussion with the residents in this area. The approval you made back in 2010 discussed how we needed to work with the residents in this area about some type of fencing to screen the trail in this area. We came up with a rendering of what we thought was a good design, featuring a 12 or a 10-foot privacy fence along this, and started to get some responses in this area on both sides of. Some people want the fence shorter, some want it taller. So we have to keep talking and working to a consensus in this area, but
Is there any reason, is there any ability to, and money, to make more of a sound wall between the entrance ramp and the trail and that neighborhood?
It actually was a condition. It's on page 6 near the back of our packets. It's from the minutes. And condition 7 was that a reasonable sound wall be constructed for segment 19 that was satisfactory to the city. And so depending on who you've heard from in response, that was always, it wasn't so much the visual of the trail as it was the sound wall issue, which has existed for that neighborhood for years. And MnDOT's list is so long, and it takes so long for projects to come up to the top. So the hope was that in constructing this project, since there were needs, that this was a way to get at that solution.
sure. In talking with MnDOT, they, of course, like you said, reconstructing Highway 100 is not on their short-term or even their long-term radar. So in order for a noise wall to be justified through MnDOT, you have to demonstrate both a decibel reduction and that whatever you're proposing to build is cost effective, and there's a formula for that in order to be eligible for us to use our federal grant money on that wall. And in preliminary discussions with MnDOT, it sounded like they didn't think it was going to be justified in this area, so that means the entire expense for the wall would fall on Three Rivers. And Jonathan was more involved in the 2010 discussion, but it's our understanding that the intent was more of a taller privacy fence type that would do some screening, prevent some noise, but really not be the 20-foot tall concrete wall that you see parallel to freeways.
Yeah, when we worked with the CAT, the Community Assessment Team, I believe her name was Nancy, was a very active member, and she used to live right in that stretch. I believe she's since moved. One thing that she was telling us was that the folks aren't necessarily looking for a really big, giant wall because it wipes out their whole western view. But they were looking for something solid and something reasonable. But they all thought that they should have the same thing as well. And that's where we need to continue to work with these folks to try to reach some sort of consensus amongst themselves, really, as to what makes the most sense. But I don't think we were envisioning one of those giant 20-foot super walls that keeps out King Kong type stuff.
I don't think anybody had concrete in mind. Nancy Crane from Poppy Lane was the one. And I think the concrete, 20 feet is something that sounds familiar to me, but it was more just because I think that was people's thoughts about sound walls. And I don't think people were necessarily talking about concrete. Wood is absorbent, sound absorbent, so that could be a good option. But I appreciate the fact that you're working with people to try to get some consensus.
Sure. And we're flexible. You know, we weren't thinking something out of Menards. We were thinking something better. there, but we need to figure out what the folks are there are looking for as well.
There's some wood sound wall over along 169, south of the crosstown.
On the frontage
On the
road.
frontage road on Macaulay Trail on the east side. You could take a look at
The
that.
developer put it up. It's not huge, but I was kind of hoping that that would be on the, right next to the freeway entrance. So then the bike path and the backyards were more contiguous. But it sounds like that's not the plan, that that wall, whatever, or fencing, whatever it will be between the bike path and the backyards, correct? And not next to the freeway. Well, if they want a better view, if they put it next to the freeway, it gives them more visual space.
I've heard from the two property owners on the south end of this area, and they, like I said, we showed, just as a preliminary starting point to start these discussions, a 10-foot tall privacy fence. I don't know if you're familiar with this parcel, but they had a nice wood fence built as part of that development. We showed it to
part of
match,
Burgundy Place had a wood fence.
yes, to match that aesthetic coming around the corner, but just be 10 feet tall. And these two residents had no issue with the look, but they don't want it 10 feet tall, they want it shorter.
Okay.
But then I heard from another resident further north upset that we're not proposing freeway-style concrete noise walls. So we have to, but then I exchanged emails with her, and it seemed like she just wanted to get as much height out of the design as she could. So we're going to have to just work with these people, and perhaps the height varies within reason along the length, but...
Okay.
Continuing through the Burgundy condos area, that the trail is proposed to run in the boulevard area between the back of curb on the fire lane that passes along the north side and the fence we were just talking about. We'll have to build retaining walls in order to there's a pretty big grade transition west to east along that property. But we think we may have to take down that fence that was built during construction, but the intent would be to put it back up. And so the neighbors on the north side would have the same view after trail construction that they do now. We do need an easement from this property right now, which is for sale. We hear that the sale it's sold?
I thought it was sold, yeah.
Last I heard, the sale was imminent, so
Yeah.
we're just kind of holding off on going further with the easement discussions until the new property owner is in place.
You might want to take a look at the approvals that were part of the Burgundy Place project. Seems to me like we had some leverage at the time and required that trail be back there.
Mm-hmm.
So you may have some leverage if you look back at the approvals for the project.
Yeah.
That one was a little bit before my time. I remember there was some pretty extensive landscaping that was required in between the fire lane and the fence.
Well, we did write something into the approval of the initial Pentagon Park proposal, the Wayzata Properties proposal. So that proposal itself is gone, but the language would be in that approval.
Would be in that one. And the first, okay, we can look at that.
And they happen
We got
kind
one with
of
the land?
not simultaneously, but in close time.
Question for Roger, would that run with the land?
Assuming it was recorded, depending on what it says, it could.
Well, we're taking a look at anyway.
Yes.
We have met with the existing property owner as well as the selling agent, and I guess nothing to this point has given us any indication that the easement is going to be difficult to obtain. Of course, we don't know what the new property owner's take is going to be, but take that for what it's worth. Moving on, of course, we get into the Fred Richards area. The line you see on this map remains as was approved back in 2010 when Fred was still a golf course. We acknowledge it as part of the Fred Richards redevelopment. There may be opportunities to realign the trail definitely within this area. So we're just expecting to be engaged in the design effort for that property, and we're just letting that process play out. And if we're approached to
Would it
collaborate
be-
on the regional trail.
Okay, would it be possible, right where your pointer is, to
Go north.
north instead of going, because that exit going out, I know our
That was my
developer
question, too.
doesn't really want that going forward. And we might be trading him for an entrance coming from the south, kind of where our building is right there, kind of below your pointer right now. So would it work to cut the corner, so to speak?
Yeah. Stay in the green space?
Yeah.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
it would.
I mean, it would be a prettier trail
Yes.
there. Okay.
Absolutely.
It looks like it would save you some cost on the length of the segment too.
That's correct. So yeah, we have quite a bit of flexibility just in terms of getting from A to B.
Right.
What type of lead time
Okay.
do you need though in order to get it constructed? Because it's 2015, 2016, correct?
That's correct. That's an excellent question. So we need to start getting things approved by MnDOT for the federal aid grant process this fall. So I think we're saying if we had a plan figured out by late September, early October, that we'd be in, that works for us. And it sounds like that's consistent with the schedule of the Fred Richards process, to my knowledge.
Well, it's its last year, and usually, Ann, is it October that the golf course shuts down the end of October?
We did, I think, have some discussions about using more the southern side. Not
Right.
outside, but the southern side. And I
Right.
think it's probably important to note that as we go forward.
But this stays basically on the southern side, even if we cut the corner.
Oh, absolutely.
I-
Not a criticism of that, just didn't want
Oh, I
there to be a
wasn't suggesting you move
misunderstanding.
anywhere. I really
Yeah.
was looking at right before we get to the building, being able to curve it so that it's,
Kind of like so.
yeah.
The
Yeah.
park reuse plan comes forward in October for final approval. So if we have that plan at that point, maybe it would include a recommended alignment? Okay. My parks director's nodding yes, so that's good. Okay, thanks.
And that, I don't think our intent at this point is to take that parking lot out. So, the building and the parking lot right now are still part of that park and will potentially remain there. Okay.
Moving on to Park Lawn Avenue, wherever the trail ties in along this length, it's proposed to run along the west and north side of Park Lawn Avenue. And the plan here is to do similar to what was done on this segment of Gallagher Drive. The city has a 2016 street reconstruction project planned, and similar to Gallagher Drive, which was narrowed up in order to fit an off-street regional trail. That's the plan for Park Lawn as well. So that construction wouldn't start until 2016. As I said, Gallagher Drive is already built. Where we cross France Avenue, the plan is to follow the scheme that's been done with the other intersections along France Avenue in terms of any upgrades for pedestrian crossing of that area. City is acquiring an easement from Macy's here, and then we would request a limited use permit to use this segment of trail through that easement, using the existing promenade over to York Avenue and east of York Avenue, and then proceeding south along the west side of Xerxes Avenue, passing by the YMCA, and then I think there are 9 residential properties on the west side of Xerxes. We don't need any easements there.
Back to the France Avenue crossing, and then you go across to the to the east. That first turn, that is such a busy outlet for that mall right there.
Right here.
Yeah, how do you navigate? I mean, that during the day, that is just insane.
That is tough.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's also wide.
What's the strategy there?
I think it's going to have to be just considering signage for both trail users and potentially for drivers entering and exiting that intersection.
That's gonna
Yes.
the whatever the warning system is, because of the volume of the people coming in and out. That's going to have to be really thought through to manage those conflicts.
Okay.
Some kind of pavement, really clear pavement marking that's updated really regularly. I think the stop sign is on private property, and there's been some fading that's happened over the years, and it's a wide crossing.
Okay.
Yeah, it's kind of an open swoop. Maybe it can get tightened up a little bit. Because if you can't swoop, but you have to actually crank the wheel hard to turn, then you have to slow down.
Yeah. They have that big parking ramp, but most of that, the volume, I think, comes on the convenience parking.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, that concludes the tour of the route. It's at the south end. We, of course, tie into the existing trail down here at Richfield. Update on the public participation efforts. The first bullet point here has kind of been our marching orders as we proceed with our design efforts and relative to where the trail gets located. With the exception of the major route changes that I described to you, we generally found that the route as shown in the master plan was accurate. And so given that there wasn't a great potential for change, we've focused our public participation efforts on largely meeting the clause in the council approval relative to trail screening, and the language of that is here. It's essentially offering either fencing or different types of vegetation. We set the threshold of who would be offered this vegetation as 50 feet from where the proposed trail edge is 50 feet from the residential property line. And that's well in excess of the threshold that has been set for other regional trail projects, but just given the sensitivity, we wanted to take additional steps to screen the trail where we could. 49 packets went out in mid-May, and that was where we were 100% confident on that the trail wasn't going to vary with any significance. The packet gave a brief description of the project, a map of the affected area, summarized some of the council conditions, brought people up to speed given that it had been 3 or 4 years, and then outlined several screening choices. We gave people a choice of either calling or emailing me to make their choice, or to respond through an online poll, doodle polls I'm sure you all use. And the hope with that was to make it easier for people to respond and to give people the opportunity to see what other neighbors were doing and perhaps be consistent in their choices. You'll see later it wasn't much of a big hit, but that's okay. More people wanted to call and email me, and that's fine. 20 more packets went out, mostly in the 70th Street area once we felt good about that solution. And those went out early June. And then the final 8 were those segment 19 people along the ramp. And the reason for that is just it took a long time to get MnDOT comfortable with that design and get to a point where we were confident that they were going to approve that. And so we didn't want to start that discussion if MnDOT wasn't going to be able to accept the design. So here are the stats I promised you. 46 of the 77 have contacted me in some shape or form. Like you see here, only 10 use the online poll. Not sure why that is, but it's fine. And of the 36 who called me, I've met personally with 13 of them. And here are a summary of the choices. They kind of run the gamut of selection, and 17 people have either said I need more time, or we've tried not to be, real firm with our deadline, given that construction in a way is out. And if people say, I'm thinking about this, I just want to talk to my neighbors more, or some people want to bring in landscape architects or have mitigating circumstances, we're trying to accommodate that. And once they make initial contact with me, when we start out, all I have is a name and an address. But once they contact me and say, I'm thinking about this, and here's my email and phone number, it's easier for me to stay in contact and check in with them. How are you thinking about this? Do you have questions? And so we're trying to be patient with people, but come this fall, there may be a point where I need to reach out and say, all right, it's decision time. But
you flag their back property line so that they know that the fence or the screening is on their property, and they know where that line is, correct?
We did.
Okay.
We did. And the mailer clarified that that's where whatever you choose will go on your side of the property line and will be yours to maintain moving forward.
So what's the pattern of fencing look like, and what are the lengths they're doing? I mean, are they doing just one side and this person has wood and then the next one has fence, or are there any people that have aligned them as groups?
They have, yeah.
Okay.
They haven't used the online poll, to my knowledge, to fill us. It's more of a let's get together in our driveways and talk about this, but I've heard a handful of occasions where 3 or 4 property owners have gotten together and said, let's match each other.
And they were surprised where their property ended, or they were not necessarily?
Some were surprised.
Okay.
Yeah.
So do you have a slide on schedule?
I do.
All right.
Here you go. A summary of a little bit where we've been. As I said, Park Board approved on June 10th, School District on the 16th, and Transportation Committee on the 19th. We're here today. Assuming approval without major changes, Toby will blast forward with finishing up preliminary engineering. The bulk of the effort remaining is finalizing the easements and the bridge design. The trail route is pretty well good to go. We want to have, from September, we'll roll right into final design with the intent of being out to bid on the east segment in spring of 2015.
Where does the east segment end again?
Ends at Tracy to Xerxes. So
Tracy, okay, thank you.
And when they construct it, are they starting at one end and going to the other, or is it all kind of happening at the same time? How do they do it?
It's definitely not happening at the same time. The
Okay.
boardwalk construction is best suited for winter work, where the wetland areas are frozen and you can move around without getting stuck everywhere. So that the boardwalk areas probably won't start until winter 2015-16. That'll be among the last
The
segments.
east part doesn't have that much boardwalk on it.
Just
though.
the segment along Valley Lane,
Valley Lane, yeah.
that we talked about. That's so from Valley Lane to 70th Street
Okay.
is the only boardwalk on the east half.
Okay.
So it opens, that east segment opens then
It would.
in spring of 2016?
That's the plan, yes.
Okay.
And then how soon after does the west segment go under construction?
Another excellent question. So
Okay.
we there was language in the board write-up about us potentially bidding both halves at the same time and then
Yep.
staggering construction. We've met more with MnDOT, the federal aid staff, trying to talk through the mechanics of that, given that we don't have a grant for the west half in hand yet. And so we've learned that we can't bid them both as one piece. But we are still moving forward with pursuing federal aid for the west half and having that available in 2016 such that construction could progress from one half to the other. It would be 2 separate contracts, but if all goes well, it would be seamless from one to the next. But there's the big if in there of the getting the grant. And I don't know if you want to speak more to that, or does that sum it up? So if that all were to come together, the west half would be under construction the 2016 season, likely spill into 2017, but our goal is to have the whole 7.5 miles done and open in 2017.
Right, yeah, fantastic. Well, we'll do the best we can at the tab on the federal funding. We're getting good help from Jonathan, good guidance from him on that. And your chair,
Right.
John Gunyu, has been terrific.
So
you
we
need a final
motion?
approval,
So
don't you?
moved.
Second?
Everybody's enthusiastic about
Yeah.
this. We got a motion and a second to approve the final alignment of 9 Mile Creek Regional Trail as articulated this evening by Mr. Nelson from the Three Rivers Park District. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say nay. Carried. Thank you. Thank you, gentlemen. Now we're going back to the reports and recommendations, and we are going to student board and commission interviews and recommendations. Members Brindle and Bennett did a tremendous amount of work for the council and for the community, and meeting with and interviewing 58 students for 16 positions, and I'll explain it. I don't know who wants to go first.
Well, 53 students actually interviewed, and as I was looking back at some history for some of the reporting, I saw Member Swenson's motion from 2010 that an interview committee be created of council members whose last names began with B.
All right, well,
So,
it was a good motion.
it's a very good motion. So this, I think, was our 5th summer of
Sure got
interviewing.
a second from somebody whose name didn't end in B.
I would assume so.
This is our 5th summer of interviewing every
I'm
student
impressed.
who's applied, and it's been a real pleasure to meet them and to hear about their interests and their passions and their involvement. So the first item that we have is the actual appointments, and again interviewed the 53 students out of 58 who applied, and 32 of them will be seniors in the fall, 20 will be juniors, 1 will be a sophomore. We had great participation from the board and commission chairs. And Mary, do you want to say some things that we learned in terms of participation and making it meaningful for students and commissions?
Sure. During the interviews, we had an opportunity to meet with some of the board chairs and board vice chairs and members of the commissions who helped us with interviews. And that's always nice because we get to we get to have some interaction between the actual commissions and the students who want to serve on those commissions. What we observed is that on some of the commissions, the chairs of the commissions are very good at engaging students in conversation and pulling them into the discussion. And in some commissions, it's a little less so. And that comes across in talking to the students about the interaction and how much they feel they've been part of the process. So I think the way that Joni and I came out of this is we'd like to recommend a model that the Planning Commission uses. And that is that the chair of the Planning Commission sits at the center of the dais, and the students sit on either side of the chair. And then the remaining commission members then fill out the rest of the dais. So as you are addressing the chair, you're looking right at the student commissioners. And just by doing that, they're feeling more engaged. But also, the chair of the Planning Commission does individually engage them. Although, over time, they've matured in their deliberation process and they jump right in without invitation. So, but I think I would like to formally encourage that, to try that sort of format in all the commissions. I don't know that it's necessary that the chair sit in the middle, but that the students sit closer to the chair so that they are engaged and the chair can encourage that. But I think that would be positive.
So we are recommending the appointment of 16 students, and 11 of them will be seniors, 5 will be juniors. We are recommending 4 reappointments. The terms are just 1 year, and most students serve the 1 year, but there have been reappointments in a number of years. And there are 3 things that we look at. We look at exceptional service. We look at whether or not there's an ongoing project in which the student has been involved, and then also is the work of that board or commission highly technical, which the work of the Planning Commission is, and we have found that it's really beneficial to have a senior serving and a junior. The senior kind of mentors the junior student, helps bring them along, and then they in turn in the next year can be a mentor to a student as well. And we're hearing really good, consistent reports year to year about the quality of the involvement, both again from the students and from the boards and commission members themselves. So we work to balance continuity with opportunity, again, but looking at those 3 criteria. We also, because of the number of applicants and the real faithfulness of a lot of students who've carved out time for this involvement, but in some years we do experience some students who have maybe underestimated their schedule. and the demands of their schedule, or maybe we try to be really clear in the interviews, and having the board and commission chairs involved helps. This is the work of this board or commission. There are students who come in, for instance, with a great interest in human rights, but it may not translate to those issues on a local level. So we do try to make those matches. When those matches don't work out and there's an issue with attendance, we would recommend that the attendance ordinance be used as it is with regular adult members, and so we are also recommending that alternates be listed, and that when attendance is reviewed after the 4 fall months, that if the attendance requirements of 75% of the meetings and no more than 2 meetings in a row missed, if those can't be met by a particular student, then an alternate be appointed in that student's place, and hopefully then it would be a better match. And so the list includes both appointments and listing of alternates.
Good. Thank you, ladies. Member Bennett, would you want to take the first 4 commissions or boards down through the Heritage Preservation Board and indicate who you're recommending, and then Member Brindle could take the last 4.
Sure. For the Arts and Culture Commission, we are recommending the reappointment of Sophia Munich and Jack Reddy, with alternates Claire Lindgren and Jenna Claire Kramer. For the Community Health Commission, we are recommending the reappointment of Aditya Mittal. We are recommending the appointment of Megan Perzer, and alternates Matthew Jerza and Emily Reinke. For the Energy and Environment Commission, we are recommending the appointment of Riley Anderson and Sanaya Panadaban, and alternates Ezra Sergeant Leventhal, Maria Kloiber, and Emily Ding. For the Heritage Preservation Board, we are recommending the appointments of Joseph Druckmann and Peter Otness, with alternates Drew Sposip and Rodika Tandan. And that's my 4.
All right. And Human Rights and Relations Commission, we are recommending the appointments of Nicole Gates and Katrina Weinert, with alternates Christina Wagner and Amy Fang. At the Park Board, we are recommending the appointment of Asif Chowdhury and Graham Caldwell, with alternates Talia Wilmert and William Staunton. Planning Commission, we are recommending the reappointment of Taylor Halva and the appointment of Madison Seeley, with alternates Anik Lohani and Annie Moorhead. And Transportation Commission, we are recommending the appointments of Jack Campbell and Anna Rummel, with alternates of Rosalie Bruns and Talia Wilmert.
Someone care to move this matter?
So moved.
Second.
All right, we've got a motion and a second. Further discussion. All those in favor of making the appointments recommended by members Brindle and Bennett, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, say nay. Carried. Thank you again for your excellent work.
Yes.
Much appreciated.
It's, it continues to be an honor to get to know some of these young people in the 10-minute interview, but it is amazing what they're involved in and what their aspirations are. So a big shout out of thank you to all those who are interested in doing this, and to those who have been involved. I do want to say that there are some wonderful young people who served this last year who we did not reappoint, and that is no reflection on their service at all, but really trying to give as many people an opportunity as possible.
Oh, thanks for that clarification. So the next, Member Bennett, did you have one other comment?
Well, just the attendance recommendations.
Okay.
Staff asked if we would embody our attendance recommendations in a written memo, so that was the change in your agenda, and that is on the desk this evening. It just discusses the applicable code and how we got to 2 members per commission, the interview process that we follow with regular members and student members, where we advise them of the attendance requirement, and then the practices that are being followed with updated attendance records in the minutes, how that helps members track their attendance from month to month, the annual reporting. And what we are recommending in terms of change is really just 2 things. This midterm point of reporting, where we will learn about the student attendance with that annual reporting in January, and then have the ability to reappoint if needed, if there's a vacancy arising. And then the second thing, of course, is the operation of the attendance ordinance, which has not been employed for most students. It has been employed a couple of times, but we're asking that it be consistently applied, and that if there are de facto vacancies, that then one of the alternates be appointed to serve the remainder of the term. We're also asking in practice that the attendance reports include both the spring and fall attendance, because so that we can do a better tracking of what we're seeing from students, and that's all embodied in the written report.
Good. Thank you.
So could we have...
You want a motion on that?
Yeah.
Yeah. You want to go ahead and make the motion?
Second. Okay.
Okay, we got a motion and a second on the attendance requirements that Member Bennett described. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed say nay. Carried. The next matter on our agenda does not require any action, but it is an update on the driving range and executive course renovation project that began its planning phase before Joe Abood shows up here. So he's kind of come in towards the front end of this project, but nonetheless not at the very beginning of the planning stage.
It is, in Your Honor, and at the end of last week's council meeting, there was you asked a question of me about what the potential impact of the extraordinary wet weather we've had this spring was going to be on this project, and so we've decided to kind of put this together in an informational presentation to you. There isn't any action that we're asking for from the council tonight, but we know you're certainly interested in this subject, and we want to explain what's happening with it. So, Ms. Catry, would you do that, please?
Yes, thank you. Mayor Hovland, members of the council, as City Manager Neal said, we certainly have had some weather issues. And I can tell you that even since the July 1st City Council meeting, we've had several meetings, we've had many discussions, and it wasn't until within the last week that we've made some decisions that I wanted to share with you this evening. If you recall, our original schedule was to start construction on the driving range and executive course and in approximately August 1st of this year, and we had hoped that construction would wrap up in October, November, and we'd be able to open the driving range in the spring of 2015 and the executive course in July of 2015. And so far to date, we have done really an extraordinary amount of work. In April, we hired our golf course architect, and in May, we hired SEH to work with us on the watershed delineation, on mitigation efforts, and also to help us through the watershed and Army Corps of Engineers permitting process. Very shortly after hiring SEH, we received notification from them that the Army Corps of Engineers they sent out a public notice stating that their permitting process was taking 4 to 12 months with an average of 8 months. And so that certainly was a major red flag for us at the time, but we continued full speed ahead and still continue to move full speed ahead with the project. As you know, in May and June, we saw unprecedented amounts of rain, which delayed the wetland delineation process. There were several weeks that we had the wetlands that needed to be delineated that were standing underwater. So that delayed that process. I was actually very impressed at how quickly SEH was able to get the delineation done in early June. And on June 5th, they submitted an application to the Watershed District. Then we had more heavy rains in June, so we had to wait to get Bar Engineering out. Bar Engineering represents the Watershed District to do their initial site review. And then on July 10th, we had a pre-permit application meeting at Braemar with representatives from the Army Corps of Engineers, the Watershed District, the technical team that's going to be making recommendations to the Watershed District, our architects, and our staff. We, unfortunately, are facing a delay in the construction. Some of the reasons are the permitting process. As I mentioned, the Army Corps of Engineers permitting process is 4 to 12 months out. Best case scenario is 4 months. They're averaging 8 months right now. We could bid the project without having the permits in hand, but it's risky. It's very risky, and we run the risk of escalating the costs in the project if the scope changes, and we also run the risk of not a very competitive bidding environment because our potential contractors are going to know that we don't have permits in place, and they're probably going to raise the price of the project that they give us just to cover any issues that might arise. Also, in terms of the competitive bid environment, as we get into August, even a little bit later, these golf course construction companies have already set their schedules for the remainder of the year, and we've already heard from a couple of companies that we know we would like to do the work that they're already booked and they're not going to be available this fall. If we delay the start any later in the fall of 2014, we will lose the entire 2015, both in the driving range and the executive course. It gives us the ability on a positive side to coordinate the Braemar master plan and the stormwater master plan with this project. And another positive is that it does allow us more time to work cooperatively and positively with the Watershed District and the Army Corps of Engineers, so we're not having to put forth a project that we might not be as happy with, might not meet all of our needs, but we know is going to receive a quicker approval. We feel that if we have more time to work and have some back and forth with those two entities, that we're going to get a much stronger product for the city of Edina. So the revised timeline that I'm proposing is to continue to move forward as aggressively as we have been on our permit applications. In the next couple of months, we would like to finalize the design and bid package. We would like to ask the City Council to authorize bidding early next year at about the same time we hope to obtain our permits. In January and February, we could bid the project, February award the project, and then we would be looking at a mid-July or early August start of construction with a wrap-up of construction on October 1. Then in that scenario, we would be able to open the driving range in the spring of the next year. We probably would be hitting off of mats on the new concrete tee line, and we'd be hand-picking balls until the grass is good and solid, but at least we'd be outside on our brand new driving range. I think there'd be a lot of excitement around that. And then we would be looking at very early summer, probably at the latest, July 1, to open our new par 3 course. So with that, I stand to answer any questions.
Questions for Director Catry? Member Brindle?
I just have one thing. In reading the 5 points in the staff recommendation, number 5 has a few words that just kind of jumped out at me. A major challenge of the project is replacing the impacted wetlands and adding required wetland buffers. And I went, what? Replacing the impacted wetlands. So from the standpoint of protecting wetlands or making sure that we don't decrease what we have, what does it mean to replace an impacted wetland?
Well, that's a great question, Member Brindle, and that's something that we're working with the Watershed District and the Army Corps of Engineers on right now. As we went through the wetland delineation process, we found to have more wetlands in the driving range area than we realized. And so we're currently in a conversation with the Watershed District, with Bar Engineering, to determine, is this really a wetland? How are we going to mitigate? Can we have some trade-offs here? And so that's exactly the conversations that we need to have. Now, on the north side of the driving range, we have some areas that currently collect water that we will be filling. And we spent a couple of hours last week with all of the entities involved in this project looking at aerial maps over the last 50 years to determine if these are natural wetlands, if this was part of a construction that we actually built, these depressions. So those are the conversations that we're having right now. Then the other issue is the buffering. So as you impact areas on this course, you have to improve buffers in certain areas where you're impacting. So those are the areas that we're currently evaluating and negotiating as well.
Thank you. I think, and you'd have to go back to before my time here, to when the Clooney 9 was being built. Mm-hmm. I think that's when those wetlands along the roadway were established as quid pro quo of filling those and then establishing an equal square footage area of wetland. So I think we'd be looking at the same trade-off.
Yeah. Thank you.
I really appreciate the update. Thanks. And it sounds like it's a reasonable plan, that we're looking for a good bid. We're looking for a project that's completed at the timeline that best suits our golfers. They'd like something new next year, but they would like to be out there in the spring to be playing on the driving range. So,
thank you.
One of the questions I'm getting, because word of this is getting around, I've had a few emails, is what about the Fred? It was projected that we'd be in construction in August, and it made sense then to close the Fred at the end of this year. And so I'm getting inquiries about, well, do we need it next year? Because we're not going to start this project until the middle of next year. Have you given that some consideration, some thought?
Mayor Hovland, honestly, we have continued to move full speed ahead with the direction that we received from the council in March. And we really don't view this as a reason to change course on that project. As we see it, the time frame and the scenario is almost identical. It's just a year later. If we would have started construction on the project in October of this year, we would have had Fred open for a couple of months, which is certainly better than nothing, but really the time frame is very similar with the golf course being closed as the council approved a few months ago.
Thank you. Thanks for the update.
Thank you very much.
All right, next matter before us is sketch plan review on 4121 West 50th Street. Someone here to handle that matter? Or Carrie, do you want to introduce the topic?
I don't believe that unless he's around the corner.
I was looking in the audience and was trying to figure out who was going to
I was too.
represent the applicant on this matter.
It's not you, Bob. Is it you?
So if we don't have an applicant here, can we put it off move it to the next meeting? Would that be the most logical thing? So at least it's...
It would be. It's for their benefit.
There was a Matt Duffy that appeared at the Planning Commission.
I'll move the table.
I'll second.
And is that with the understanding that we're tabling it until the August meeting?
August 4th.
Okay.
All right, good. Got a motion and a second to table the sketch plan review matter of 4121 West 50th Street until our August 4th, 2014 meeting. Any further discussion on that matter? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed say nay. Carried. And then we have a resolution accepting various grants and donations. We have a motion on that.
Second.
Got a motion and a second on resolution 2014-77. Discussion. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed say nay. Carried. Donations this reporting period. The Edina Public Works Department received $2,300 in flower value from the Edina Garden Council for the Edina Veterans Memorial and Arneson Park. Thank you. And then correspondence and petitions. It looks like we had additional materials on the dais this evening. I take it that's the extent of it. Thank you. Aviation noise update, Member Bennett and possibly Manager Neal.
Thank you. There is a Noise Oversight Committee meeting tomorrow. Manager Neal and I will be attending, and following that meeting, we will meet with John Nelson and other Metropolitan Airports Commission staff to decide where the remote monitoring towers should be placed for this fall. Do you have any update on that?
No more than that. I think he's, the question I had for you was, does the NOC meeting start at 3? Is that?
No, the NOC meeting, which is open to the public, begins at 1:30, and usually there's around a time certain for its ending. It usually ends no later than about 3 o'clock.
So his
between
estimate
2:30
to
and
us
3.
was that our meeting with him would start about 3 o'clock.
That, I believe, is correct, and I'll be reading those emails tonight when I go home.
That's what I got.
I have a question on that. I was reminded of a statistic about projected passenger and aircraft operations. And by 2030, we're projected to have 28 million passengers a year in the airport from 16 million today, so a 75% increase. And then total aircraft operations for the year are to grow 40% from 450,000 to 630,000 by 2030. So given that much growth, how do we anticipate meeting our strategic goal of overflights not exceeding 2012 levels? How is that realistic?
It's not.
Well, understanding what we do and don't control, there has been some expanded use of some of the outstate airports. Understanding that the projections are for this airport, but there has been some expanded use just within the last months even of the airport at Rochester. I know that the airport at Duluth would welcome more traffic. There's been a municipal effort underway in St. Cloud. Fargo's seen expanded use over the years. So the question of the realistic nature of a goal of reducing overflights, not concentrating overflights, I think remains a big goal.
The strategic goal is keep overflights at 2012 levels. I just want to make sure we're setting a realistic goal for ourselves and for the public that's watching. Right. As to what we can realistically accomplish together with noise, with other communities, and with some of these other methodologies you mentioned.
I think it's also important to remember that overflights really is a proxy for noise, right? So hypothetically, we don't care how many overflights we have if they create the same noise level or less noise than we have today. And part of what we hear from the aviation folks, both on the technical and equipment side and also at the airport, is that they expect to have a continuation in the success of technology to reduce the sounds that aircraft make.
So more flights, but with better fleet management and better technology.
Absolutely. Okay. So fleet mix is something we pay a lot of attention to, and as Councilmember Bennett said, I think the other issue is concentration, and that's, I think, where we seem to have placed a lot of attention on that. Right. When the RNAV issue came to us.
Well, another way to respond to your question is, by ourselves we can't do anything. In partnership with other communities, we can try to see that some of the community goals in terms of dispersal of flights originating from this airport, making good use of the state's airports, the state's transportation system, and then some of the federal initiatives, some of the environmental review, study of effects of concentrated noise, and looking at those fleet changes that Member Swenson and I heard about last November in Seattle, that could be purchased in newer aircraft, can't usually be retrofitted, but can be purchased in newer aircraft. So I think we're going to want to continue to work in those partnerships, again, on a local level, a state level, and a national level, to move as much as we can toward that goal. We do know that 30 left is seeing a substantial increase in traffic over the last year or more, and that is the runway. Member Sprague, that I think you're hearing the most about.
Right. Even with those fixes, I guess I'm just a little bit bearish on the prospects of volume remaining the same. Maybe we can, the fleet mix will change. That's out of our control. But with those type of projections, I just want to put that out there that, let's set the right expectation.
realistic.
But you're right. I mean, overhauling how the flights are dispersed around the system, yes, but still, with that much growth, we got to think that there's going to be substantially more volume. Hopefully we can get that less concentrated and less volume per flight with the technology that's out there.
Well, realistic expectations are very important. That's part of why we are looking at the monitoring. Part of why we requested it in the first place
That's
was for
gonna be
that
great to have those
public
results.
information. And there will be, in addition to the Noise Oversight Committee meeting tomorrow, and a person who wishes to speak at that meeting needs to find a sponsor on the seated body. Probably the chair would probably sponsor if someone shows up at that meeting and wants to talk. They would need to talk with her before the meeting. Also Councilmember Quincy, and then of course the at-large rep, Councilmember Bergman from Apple Valley. Otherwise, a bigger opportunity for the public to have input is at the public input meeting next Tuesday, which will be held in Mendota Heights beginning at 7 p.m. I will not be able to be at that meeting and hope that maybe one of my council fellows would be able to attend. So 7 p.m. Mendota Heights City Hall on Tuesday, the 22nd of July. And that's a quarterly public input meeting with the Noise Oversight Committee meeting occurring every other month.
All right. Thank you. We're all making notes on that matter at Mendota Heights City Hall. We'll see if we can cover that. All right. Council comments. Member Brindle.
Thank you. I just have one. Tomorrow there's a meeting with Elina to talk about the study on the increase in diabetes in Somali women. So I'll see what they've discovered.
Thank you. Member Bennett.
Just one request, and that's with our work sessions that we make sure that we have inspection copies, and that's all.
Member Swenson.
Oh, the normal quiet one, unfortunately, has more things than I usually have. We've gotten a couple letters on a particular road. Have they petitioned, and do they know to petition? It's Woodland Road. I know one was to you for street reconstruction.
Yeah, I've had some interaction with a couple of Woodland Road residents, and they're actually going to be having a neighborhood meeting this week. So we've shared with them a little bit about that process and really what the plan is going forward for them next year.
Okay, it's pretty bad. So I'm hoping they ask us to do something and we can get it on our plan.
They are on our schedule to get a resurfacing of their street for next year.
Okay. And then you and I talked, Manager Neal, about the a street reconstruction, Bredesen Park D, that seemed to have some lag times between work, and you and I discussed that most street reconstruction projects have a end date that they need to complete by, or there's a penalty. And are they aware of that?
Councilmember Swenson, members of council, yes, I had a discussion with our city engineer, and I believe he may have a report.
We do. So
Aren't you glad I asked?
Yeah, I just wrote a letter today to that neighborhood so I could copy the council. That'll go out tomorrow to give them an update on why the project's delayed. So we do have completion dates in our contract documents. We shifted that due to the change order for the water main. This was the project with the rusted bolts.
Yep.
We added at least a month of work to that project, so that got pushed from the August 1st completion to September 1st, and we lost a month due to weather in June. So we're looking at a end of September completion.
Okay.
We apologize, but it's weather and that extra workload. They look like they'll pave Tamarack and Aspen by early August and then pave the remainder of the streets early September. So
the neighborhood will get
that
communication about it tomorrow?
Yes, we'll mail it out tomorrow. We've been in contact with emails on a few of the residents, probably similar ones that you've been in contact with, but we thought it was due to the volume of requests, we figured it was time for a letter to everybody.
And then my last one was a conversation that we've probably all had with different people that have had sewer backup problems. And I know that we just got the latest Metro update that talks about stormwater and wastewater equals recipe for disaster. And, you know, I had several explanations to some of our residents. You know, one is what we continually do, trying to get rid of infill, I&I.
Inflow and infiltration.
Thank you. Especially with these street projects, because we're trying to get those sump pumps hooked up so they go out to the street and don't go into the drain in the house. What are some of our other things that we're doing? She was concerned that we weren't being proactive enough with our sewer capacity. Some of it isn't in our hands because it's controlled by the Metropolitan Council. So I thought we should talk about that just a little bit.
Director Milner,
talk about it next time.
I'm going to let Director Milner address the subject first, and then I'll fill in if there are any gaps there.
Mayor, members of the council, I'm sure you're aware of the big studies we've been doing on our sanitary sewer system, and one of the projects this year is the Minnehaha Creek line. That's the main trunk line. Has a lot of I&I. So we're doing projects outside of our street reconstruction projects. The one thing to note with the backups is that it's easy to model the stormwater system. Sanitary sewer system is very difficult to model during one of those big rain events because there's so many endpoints, and a lot of them we don't even control. It's all the service pipes. We don't know the condition of how many thousands of homes we have in town on private property. That do they have illegal sump pump connections? Do they have holes? Do they have tree roots in there? That's where I&I is coming. So we do our best to model that and predict it, and every time we have a big storm, we have a better understanding of those points of where the sewer does back up, and we always look to see where there's improvements we can make to, you know, manholes that may be underneath the 100-year flood elevation, which is what we saw in that June 19th storm.
You have one on Birchcrest that project has gotten delayed a year, but it's in their manholes in the backyard of a resident's house that actually are manholes that go to the sewer, but they get covered in the spring with water from the melt, and I'm sure they had a lake. They said they had Lakeshore. I got a really lovely email from them a couple weeks ago during the rain. So those are the things that you correct as you can correct them, and it sounds like you're being more proactive in correcting things that aren't attached just to a street reconstruction project.
Yep, we do some of both. So the lids you're talking about, we've inspected every sanitary sewer manhole in town, and we know which lids are conforming and non-conforming. Non-conforming have that little open pick hole on the top. That's how they popped them open. Now we're doing sealed lids so water can't get in there. So every street project, we replace every casting in there. And then if we find other manholes where there's rings that would allow water in, or manholes, we do those on as public works staff has time available to address those.
Now the other part of my email tour obviously was to read our quarterly magazine, because we have, again, even in the one we just got this week, again reminded people that they need a rider on their insurance policy. Yes. I do know that our new insurance policy will sometimes cover that, but in a flood situation that we just had, that is considered the type that is not qualified for coverage.
That's right, Councilmember Swenson and members of council. One of the benefits of joining the League of Minnesota Cities Insurance Trust this year is that we will have access to no-fault sewer backup insurance that we did not have access to before. We're going to have we're learning a little bit more about that from the league. We're going to have a discussion with you later this fall about how to do that, how to pay for it. But you are correct. Even if we would have had that in place, the storm that we had on June 19th was in excess of the limit of that policy, so it would not have covered damages from it.
Do you have any idea why Golden Valley went to requiring certification of private sewer lines upon sale? Did they have such an immense I&I issue that they decided to go to the certification process as a strategy?
I do not know exactly why they did that, but it's a way to address that issue on the private side.
Just curious why they did it and what type of impact it's been having. Be nice to talk to that engineer or city manager to see.
And then my final thing is for resident Lori Grote, who wanted to know if we could get a definition for a main entryway of a house, and I have heard already from Kerry Teague that he is working on that. So before I asked, he started it. So thank you, Kerry. That's it.
Member Sprague.
Pass.
All right. Well, two big things to talk about here. One is Southwest LRT. We 4 cities down. They've approved the project. The municipal consent has been granted in Eden Prairie, Hopkins, Minnetonka, and now St. Louis Park. And so congratulations to all those communities. Minneapolis has yet to vote on this matter, but it looks like we may have a deal with them. So keep your fingers crossed on the extension of the Green Line from downtown Minneapolis all the way to Eden Prairie. Second thing was in my mail is a notification of a grant award under the Minnesota Livable Communities Act. We remember we applied for the contamination cleanup grant for the Pentagon Park South redevelopment project. We were awarded a grant in the amount of $448,100.
We've been very successful.
That's the third one.
There were 15 applications. They awarded grants to 10 redevelopment projects, and that is one of them. So that's great news. This Friday night, summer music in the park continues at Roslyn Park with Patty Peterson, if my memory serves me right. And then we've got Walk with the Mayor on Saturday morning, the 19th, at Bredesen Park, 9 o'clock, if you want to join me. And that's it. Other than, let me ask the council this question. We had in our work session a discussion about recommended policy for future midterm vacancies and recommended change to appointment term dates. Assistant Manager Karen Kurt handled that matter. Maybe I'll ask you, Manager Neal, would you like a motion on those 2 matters tonight or at some future time?
I thought we had decided that we were going to put that on your next agenda.
Okay. All right.
Right?
Yeah,
good.
so we're going to check with Kathy.
Yep. We'll put it on. We'll put it on.
That
the
was
next.
that was a different issue. That was an appointment issue. This was the
More process.
This was more process oriented in terms of determining when we were going to do certain things. How to handle midterm.
Yeah, if you're, that you can do tonight. If you're comfortable doing that, a motion is all that takes.
So her suggestion was that with respect to recommended policy for future midterm vacancies, that if the midterm vacancy occurs between January through June, if an alternate exists, the project coordinator will confirm his or her availability and forward the name to the council for approval. If no alternate exists, the project coordinator will post a vacancy notice and schedule interview dates with the council. And then if a midterm vacancy occurs between July through December, the vacancy would continue until the annual appointment cycle unless otherwise directed by the council. Someone want to move that matter?
I will.
Second.
Got a motion and a second on how to handle those midterm vacancies. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed say nay. Carried. The other recommendation she had was that we changed the board and commission appointment end dates to March 1st of each year to close the gap between the date when members expect to exit and the new appointments.
So moved.
Second.
All right. Discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed say nay. Carried. That's it for me. Manager Neal.
Thank you, Your Honor. Just 3 short things. One, if you haven't been out near the Sports Dome lately, it's really looking like something now. It's looking like a big wall, especially from the baseball fields. You can really get a sense of how large that retaining wall is. But if you can kind of peer into the site, you can also see the foundations for the new hockey rink, the outdoor ice, and you can also get a sense of the new foundation for the Sports Dome itself and how large that's going to be. But that project is moving along. It's actually on target in terms of timeline, and which is amazing given the rain that project has suffered as well. But it's on target with cost and timeline. Also, we mentioned Golden Valley a little bit ago, but I did receive the official notice from Golden Valley today that they will be pulling out of our 911 contract at the end of the year. That's not a surprise. They had given us previously kind of informal notice that was going to happen, but we received their formal notice just yesterday, actually. And finally, just a reminder to all of us who come here every first and third Tuesday of the month that next time we meet here, it's the first Monday of the month on August 4th. August 4th, Monday, August 4th. And Tuesday, August 5th is night tea night. That's all I have.
Good. Anyone else?
I have just one thing, and that is, with so much activity around town, and we know that there have been weather delays, if there is something that the city controls the scheduling of, or if it's a multi-day project with Excel, Comcast, Centerpoint, something going on in the street, if it's possible to schedule around trash and recycling dates, collection dates. There have been some one-day projects that have occurred in neighborhoods on the same date as trash and recycling pickup, and it's caused some consternation, and I've heard about it several times. Great, thank you.
All right, good. Anyone else have anything else they want to add?
Well, we're 7 minutes off of the 11 o'clock close that Manager Neal had down, so.
All right. Well,
must have been that
thank
one
you.
proposal.
Hearing nothing
put
further,
off.
we stand adjourned.
Jeez, were you close on that?